Hello, my friends, and welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gouveia. I am a criminal defense attorney broadcasting from the Valley of the Sun deep in downtown Phoenix, Arizona. And today we are talking about the fallout. What happened after Donald Trump's arraignment? We spent a good 4 hours or so yesterday unpacking everything, the events leading up to the arraignment, the actual arraignment itself. We got our hands on the statement of facts and we were able to piece together exactly what was going on there. And there was a lot to unpack, but today I want to synthesize it a little bit. And remember that you can follow along at home if you are joining us at spotlightlawyer.com/Trump. This mind map, after we finished the show yesterday, I spent some time assembling the facts that we were able to gather throughout the day, and this is the summation. So you remember that we have the main parties. Alvin Bragg brought the indictment against Donald Trump, and we spent a lot of time reading through the statement of facts and all of the other things the indictment itself included yesterday. But when you boil it all down, there's really not much there, even less than we thought. This is the summary of all the charges in the Trump indictment. You see a bunch of dates here: February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, and December. Wow, it's almost like monthly payments. And each one of these criminal counts is related to one part of a payment process. So, for example, in March, count 5, which is a felony, is an invoice that Michael Cohen sent to Donald Trump and his organization. Just the sending and the receipt of the invoice itself was a felony. Then the entry of that invoice into a ledger and the cutting of a check were both separate felonies. So in March, there were 3 felonies that just came out from one process of sending an invoice and then recording the invoice and then cutting a check. 3 felonies. Now, that same process is repeated, copied, and pasted over and over again by Alvin Bragg on basically every single one of these months. And so if you are following along at spotlightlawyer.com/Trump, you can go here and just click these buttons just like I'm doing and see. May, you see it's copy and pasted. Invoice, ledger, check. June, invoice, ledger, check. We played this game yesterday. You can do it again for July, August, September, October, November, and December. Same pattern for all of the months. Michael Cohen got the invoice, drafted the invoice, sent it over, the ledger was updated, and a check was cut. All of that got sent out to Michael Cohen. Now, there were 2 things that stood out a little bit as I was going through this again with a fresh set of eyes. In February, there were 2 ledger entries that were recorded as 2 separate felonies. So there was one invoice, they all came from Michael Cohen, but there were 2 ledger entries, and I don't know exactly why. And I posted a longer tweet thread about this over on Twitter, but one idea would be that the February invoice was entered twice. It was just a duplicate entry. It could be that it was referencing a January payment, but if it was a January payment, then why wouldn't they also charge the January felonies, right? They would charge the January invoice plus the January ledger. In other words, if there's a ledger here, there should, for January, it should also be related to an invoice and a check, but it's not. So then that leads me to believe that maybe this is one ledger entry, and then there's another subsequent ledger entry that's stacked on top of it to change the original ledger entry. Okay, so in other words, Bragg would say this is the fraudulent intent. This is where there was some sort of a change. And we don't know exactly what this was. This could have just been a correction, right? A bookkeeper could have just said, oh, I thought this was for this. And then, oh, let me just, okay, we'll void that one out and I'll add another entry into the ledger. And this is what it's actually classified for. And then cut a check for it. Or Bragg would say it's fraudulent, or it could just be a bookkeeping error, right? You know, I don't know. I misclassify stuff all the time. I'm in Gmail, wrong label. Oh gosh, that doesn't go there. What a buffoon. Have to fix that. And for Alvin Bragg, that's a felony. 2 of them. So we don't know what that is, but that is one of the only anomalies in this entire indictment. It's not even interesting. It's just, it is interesting. I'm not sure why this pattern is broken, because all of the other indictments counts in the indictment follow the same pattern. So in February, a little bit different. There's also a little bit of something happening in April. So there was an April invoice that Cohen sent, but it wasn't paid by Trump and the Trump organization until June. And this is not normal. The Trump organization didn't do this. They paid very quickly, very regularly. So for example, in June, invoice went out June 16th, check was cut June 19th, 3 days later, lightning fast. Donald Trump doesn't play around, baby. May 22nd, there was an invoice from Michael Cohen. Check was cut the next day, May 23rd. And that same pattern happened. Some days the check was cut the same day. You see that in August and July. So they were paying very, very quickly. But the question was, why was there a delay in April? The actual April invoice that came from Michael Cohen was not paid until June. So it skipped over May. And this was a little bit confusing yesterday. We were trying to understand why the indictment was out of order, why the counts didn't reflect the chronological order. So we had this April to June that overlapped with the May charges. So in other words, we had some June charges that looked like, count 10 was in June, but count 11 was in May. Why is that? It feels like it's sort of out of order. But that explains it. So that is all that we see here, right? Absolutely nothing interesting other than a bunch of essentially what looked like to me recurring payments to your lawyer, right? Every monthly payments, just like you pay for anything, your Netflix bill, you have a recurring bill, you've got a lawyer on retainer, and you add them all up. You just go through and every month, this is what I need you to do. And Cohen's on standby. If he's sitting there and Trump needs him, then they just pick up the phone. Hey, Michael Cohen, we need you to do this thing. And he's on retainer, right? That's what he's there to do. That's why he gets the same payment. So it's not even that surprising. Now, a couple things that are surprising. One is that there's no reference at all to what these election crimes are. Not even a connection saying that this check was made for the concealment or any indicia in this, that there's an aggravator that would give him more jurisdiction, in this case, more ability to prosecute under the statute of limitations. So you'll also notice as we go through there, we'll come back to that point, but every one of these invoices was from Michael Cohen. They're all from Cohen. And Cohen is one of the least credible people on the planet, as far as I can tell, at least related to this case. And he has already been called basically a liar by Robert Costello, his legal advisor. He's got FEC filings that say that Trump wasn't involved in any of this. Multiple filings from his lawyer, drafted by his lawyer. We've got signed documents from Cohen saying that he waived his attorney-client privilege, and then he was on CNN saying, I don't remember even signing that. So the guy can't remember anything. And he is the only person who is the subject of the indictment. So yesterday we read through all of the statement of facts, and this was a little bit baffling because I was seeing a disconnect. But the statement of facts had all sorts of conversations about Karen McDougall, woman one, and David Pecker, the former CEO of AMI. And we're asking ourselves, what are they talking about, these people? What do they have to do with anything? They're not in the indictment. And there was allegedly another payment and other payments. And so I guess maybe they're trying to show a common scheme or plan, that Trump was doing something also illicit with Cohen, but he was also doing something illicit with Pecker and with McDougall and trying to also cover it up. But then is there a conspiracy? They didn't charge any crimes for that other allegation. It seems like in the statement of the facts that there should be, this is all leading up to, that's why we're also charging him for this one. And people were surprised. Maybe this is going to be bigger than we expected. Maybe there is more to this story. Maybe us saying this is ridiculous, maybe we were just being a little bit too quick and more was to be revealed. No, there wasn't anything. The indictment has nothing to do with any invoices, as far as I can tell, from David Pecker or Karen McDougall. So why is it being charged? We don't know. Now, there are problems that are already boiling up here before we get into the more recent reaction, but we're asking whether this is even facially sufficient on the face of this indictment. Is this even, like, if they just walk in and say, Judge, we have a statute of limitations problem, and he's not detailing what these other crimes are that would extend his jurisdiction and his ability to prosecute this, the judge could just dismiss it very quickly. One of the first motions that might be filed would be a motion to dismiss based on a violation of the statute of limitations. And I didn't see anything in the indictment that would justify a tolling of the statute. There's some speculation that it has to do with Trump's physical location and whether he was continuous or not in the state, and whether it's tolled due to his presidency. And there are other arguments to be made, but they are not strong arguments, right? They're all precarious. There's no precedent for it. He's making these, they're new, they're novel. And there are other issues with prosecutorial misconduct. Thank you, K-Bean. Got to notice there was an audio problem on locals. Let's try this. Better? I don't know what happened. We're still good all across the other fruited plane of the internet. All right. So we have questions about prosecutorial misconduct. We know Congress is going to be screaming about this for the foreseeable future. We're going to get there in a second. But there were other indications that this may be explored, prosecutorial misconduct, because of Alvin Bragg, because of people like Letitia James. They're saying that they are abusing their discretion in bringing this case, right? Every single case that comes across your desk doesn't need to be prosecuted. That's called prosecutorial discretion. You're supposed to bring cases that really serve the interest of justice and where you can get a reasonable likelihood of a conviction. This is really not either of those. Others have looked at this. The feds have looked at it. Others have taken a lot of scrutiny on this for the last 6 years, for crying out loud, and they haven't found anything, and they have to twist and turn this. Alvin Bragg, instead of twisting himself into a pretzel, is twisting himself into a twisty donut. And it is a problem for the entire country's judicial system. So that is the update on kind of where things stand logistically in terms of the indictment. It's not strong at all. But with that said, let's get into the rest of the updates today. Of course, Donald Trump has some reaction to the arraignment. We're going to go through that. We've got reaction from Congress, Byron Donalds, Tom Cotton, James Comer. Trump spoke last night. There's a lot of reaction from the media. Even they're saying, we're concerned about this. We're a little bit skeptical that this is going to go our way. We'll hear from Trump's lawyers, and then we'll turn our attention later on in a little bit over to the Proud Boys. And so Proud Boys, we've got trial day 50 and trial day 51. And there was a big update on this. Ray Subpoena update on his deposition. You can see what the ruling was. We'll come back to that in a minute. And so, as you can see, we have a lot to get to. And so before we get warmed up, we got to make sure we're properly nutricized and energized with our friends over at Field of Greens. And don't even think about skipping this ad, because this is for your health. It's good for you. So here, let's make sure that we go over to fieldofgreens.com, because we're all sick of the other attempts to lose weight, all the weight loss ads, fads, diet pills, all of those things. We've all been there. We've all done that. And we know that they don't work. But you know what does? Eating 5 healthy servings of fruits and vegetables every day. You do that, and the weight would probably just fall right off. But vegetables, not a fan. Who's got time to prepare fruit every day, all day? Instead, let's talk about Field of Greens. Now, Field of Greens is a science-backed formula, very specific fruits and vegetables that you're not going to find in any other product. Proper nutrition reboots your metabolism so you can burn calories faster and lose weight a healthier way. And Field of Greens is the only brand backed by a better health promise. You're going to look healthier, you're going to feel healthier, but the greater proof is going to come at your next doctor's visit when you go there and he says, "Wow, you've lost weight." Whatever you're doing, keep it up. And so let's get you started today. Go on over to fieldofgreens.com. When you're checking out with all sorts of goodies, make sure you use code Robert at checkout. You'll save 15%. It's code Robert at fieldofgreens.com. We appreciate you supporting our friends over there and being healthy. It's good for you. The vegetables want to be eaten. That's why they're popping out of the ground with so much excitement. So our friends at fieldofgreens.com is the place to go. And so now, my friends, let's get right to it. Trump responds to his arraignment and criminal prosecution by the partisan political hack Alvin Bragg. And we're going to listen to his speech that he gave right after he arrived back in Florida. after his arraignment, his day in court. Now, there's a lot of skepticism about the strength of the indictment. We've spent some time here unpacking that. It feels extremely weak. We're wondering if there's something we're missing here, but doesn't look like it, because Politico says there's a wall of skepticism coming down and that this is a dangerous leap, is the opinion from the Washington Post. What? Then we'll turn our attention over to Congress. We'll hear from Trump's lawyers, including one of the most brilliant legal observers in the country, Alina Abba. And then listen to Biden and turn our attention to the special counsel and get an update on what is happening with that prosecution. But first, Trump was back in Mar-a-Lago. After his day in court, Trump took the podium and explained what is wrong in America and what is happening in this country.
Everybody, we have to save our country. God bless you all. God bless you all. And I never thought anything like this could happen in America. Never thought it could happen. The only crime that I have committed is to fearlessly defend our nation from those who seek to destroy it. From the beginning, the Democrats spied on my campaign. Remember that?
Yeah.
They attacked me with an onslaught of fraudulent investigations. Russia, Russia, Russia. Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine.
Yeah, Hillary.
Impeachment hoax number one.
Michael Sussman.
Impeachment hoax number two.
Yep.
The illegal and unconstitutional raid on Mar-a-Lago.
Mar-a-Lago,
right here.
FBI, Melania's underwear drawer.
They're lying to the FISA courts, the FBI and DOJ relentlessly pursuing Republicans. And now this massive election interference at a scale never seen before in our country, beginning with the radical left, George Soros-backed prosecutor Alvin Bragg of New York, who campaigned on the fact that he would get President Trump. I'm going to get him.
Unbelievable.
I'm going to get him. This is a guy campaigning.
For a prosecutor?
You want to get President Trump at any cost, and this before he knew anything about me, didn't know a thing about me. He was campaigning. As it turns out, virtually everybody that has looked at
He's going to say who's looked at this indictment thinks it's ridiculous, I think. I think that's probably what's coming up.
everybody that has looked at even hardcore has looked at this case, including rhinos and even hardcore Democrats, say there is no crime and that it should never have been brought.
Indeed.
Never have been
Indeed,
brought.
right on.
Everybody. Even people that aren't big fans have said it. They said this is not the right thing to do.
It is not.
It's an insult to our country, as the world is already laughing at us for so many other reasons.
He's right. It is not a good thing. And he is not alone on that. Very interesting articles from sources like the Politico and the Washington Post. They're saying this doesn't feel all that good. Remember, there were many Democrats, many lefties, and many journos who were kind of climaxing yesterday, not to be too vulgar here, but this was the big day, man. They've been waiting for this for 6-7 years. They've been screaming about this from the rooftops for a long time. And then it's supposed to be a home run. It's supposed to be like this massive indictment, 34 felonies. Wow. And they were all contorting themselves. It was a really strange thing to watch. And then we read through the indictment and it's mostly crap. It's mostly garbage. Politico says, hey, Bragg's case against Trump hits a wall of skepticism. Even from Trump critics. And as we said here, this is going to vindicate Trump. Every time he comes out and says there's a witch hunt against me, and we've been following along for years, every single one of them, this proves it. A day after the historic arraignment, questions nagged Bragg's case, and he just scurried on out of there. Kyle Cheney, who is no Trump fan, all right, no Trump fan at all if you follow him on Twitter, says Alvin Bragg's case against Donald Trump is running into a wall of skepticism, including from left-leaning legal experts and liberal pundits and some of Trump's Republican detractors who've otherwise been eager to see him held accountable. A day after the DA unveiled the charging documents, some of Bragg's natural allies were left scratching their heads. what the heck is in here? Is this even sufficient? The judges even did he read it? Trump world appeared emboldened. The post-arraignment hangover was fueled by burning questions about how the prosecution's legal theories that Bragg has for now left largely unanswered are going to work. The concerns were exacerbated by the noticeable absence of support, and in some cases, pointed skepticism about the case from many of Trump's critics in Congress. Senator Mitt Romney, who twice voted to convict Trump, Romney. Gosh, that guy. He said, I believe President Trump's character and conduct make him unfit for office. Even so, I believe the prosecutor has stretched to reach a felony in order to fit a political agenda. We'll listen to the rest of Congress. He said the prosecutor's overreach sets dangerous precedent for criminalizing political opponents. Nancy Mace said, you've got to work hard to make President Trump a martyr. Congratulations, the Manhattan DA who just managed to do that. Oops. Some wondered why Bragg revived a case that he appeared to close a long time ago. And he said yesterday, we got a bunch of new information about it. That's why. Of course, the questions are about whether this is going to be barred by the statute of limitations. They're going to file that motion. I expect it to be one of the first that we see, if not the first. It's 6 years after the core underlying conduct in the case. Statute of limitations is 5 years. Even prosecutors can do that math. Bragg left those questions largely unanswered in Tuesday's filings and his public comments. He came out and took 4 questions. When asked why he changed course, he said, well, I can't talk about that. More evidence will be made available to the office and the opportunity to meet with additional data. He says, it is said that somebody wrote this, Richard Hassan, he's a campaign finance law professor. He said, it is said that if you go after the king, you should not miss. I think we said that here, and I think I heard that, I think from Biggie Smalls or something. Is that where I heard that? But he's apparently Richard Hassan listens to that stuff too. He says, in this vein, it is very easy to see this case tossed for legal insufficiency. Yeah, exactly right. Or tied up in courts well past the election before it might ever go to trial. It will be a circus that will embolden Trump, especially if he walks, right? And it's going to make all of the other prosecutions feel flat, right? If they try to get him on this. Did you see the headlines out there? I think there were reports that this was more watched than anything ever, right? In recent memory, bigger than the Oscars or whatever the most recent things were. There was a list of them. I don't watch really any of them, but I did watch the Trump thing, and most of America did too. And so if they were here, if they all tuned in, especially all the salivators, all the hyperventilators, if they have to walk that back here, then they're going to look a little foolish doing whatever they were doing yesterday so vigorously. It will be a circus that will embolden Trump, especially if he walks. Even Ian Millhiser, a legal liberal commentator for Vox, called it a dubious legal theory. He's not happy about it either. Will Trump be convicted? He says there's something very anticlimactic about the indictment. There's a very real risk this indictment will end in an even bigger anticlimax. Oh man, they're going to be so disappointed. It is unclear that the felony statute that Trump is accused of violating actually even applies to him. The indictment charges Trump 34 separate felonies. A separate document details the relationships between everybody else, Pecker and American media. He said they all work together. Okay. But there's no conspiracy charge or anything. The actual felony here is arising out of false entries. The felony statute requires Bragg to prove that Trump falsified records to cover up a crime. Bragg has evidence that Trump acted to cover up a federal crime, but it's not clear that Bragg's allowed to point to a federal crime in order to charge Trump under state law. Pomerantz said that's a gnarly legal question. So there's serious risk a judge can even toss it. Wild. So there's all sorts of other good stuff here that you can go take a look at. That's the Vox article. But it wasn't just Politico. Even the opinion piece from the Washington Post was saying very much the same thing, which is surprising. Here's the opinion written by Ruth Marcus, an associate editor from the Washington Post. What? They say the Trump indictment is a dangerous leap on the highest of wires. As the primaries continue, we rewind the clock to Trump, presidential candidate 2016. The hard question is now whether this violates the law. They say this is a scary question when it comes to the first criminal charges ever lodged against the president. I'm not saying the prosecutors will lose. They could win, and I hope they do, because a failure to secure an conviction will only inflame Trump and his supporters in the claims that the criminal justice system is being weaponized against them. Oh my gosh. Can somebody just hold a mirror up to these? He's being charged with crimes. In your own article, you're expressing concerns about what a garbage case this is and what a dangerous tripwire this is, what a dangerous leap this is, because it is so without precedent and it's so without really legal foundation. Even the indictment itself, some are saying, is legally insufficient. So if it does get dismissed, it just confirms what Trump has been saying. Yeah, okay. The hard question is whether those efforts also violated the law. Says there's no way that Trump's team, allayed by Tuesday's developments. The indictment and the accompanying recitation of the underlying facts offers almost nothing new, no surprise. Leaves open a question as whether they can mogrify, which I think is a Calvin and Hobbes phrase, this conduct into a state crime, maybe. She says, don't be fooled by the 34 counts. Yeah, it's a healthy sounding number, but it doesn't signify anything about the strength of the case. They will all rise or fall depending on the underlying foundation. And Manhattan DA says it is a cover-up of another crime. But even she says, okay, but what are the other crimes? Nobody knows. The indictment doesn't say. Bragg was asked on Tuesday, didn't say. Not well-trodden legal territory. Trump's lawyers are going to argue all accordingly, and we'll see where it goes. So pretty interesting reaction. We're seeing some concern, some skepticism, some worries from some people who would love to see Trump be prosecuted and convicted. They're taking a look at it, and they're saying the same thing that Trump has been saying, that he has been specifically targeted. Well, they're not saying that in specifically, but they're saying this case is pretty weak. And if this case is weak, why are they bringing it if they are not specifically charging Trump? Now, they're not quite there yet. We'll see if they finally get there or not. We've got others reacting to this. Congress is speaking out, upset about the Trump prosecution. We hear from Kevin McCarthy. We've got Chuck Schumer, Thomas Massie all express their opinions on Twitter. And the media circuits had James Comer, Byron Donald, and Senator Tom Cotton. And so we'll start with the Speaker of the House. He posted on Twitter right after Trump's arraignment. He said, Alvin Bragg is attempting to interfere in our law, our democratic process, by invoking federal law to bring politicized charges against President Trump, admittedly using federal funds, while at the same time arguing that the people's representatives in Congress lack jurisdiction to investigate this farce. Says not so. Bragg's weaponization of the federal justice process will be held accountable by Congress. We were asking yesterday where a lot of the Republicans were, wondering if they were going to speak out about this or if they were going to continue to tweet about art shows at art festivals while the Justice Department and the justice system is being taken over with the Democrats moving pieces around like on a chessboard, New York. Georgia, special counsel, D.C. Circuit. Are the Republicans going to sit there? McCarthy says no. Bragg's weaponization will be held accountable. And so far, McCarthy's been doing a pretty good job of delivering some of what he is saying he will deliver. Now, Chuck Schumer, who is the Senate Majority Leader, is still living in la delusional land. He posted this 11:15 a.m., April 4th. He said, I believe that Donald Trump will have a fair trial that follows the facts and the law. There's no place in our justice system for any outside influence or intimidation in the legal process. As the trial proceeds, protest is an American right, but all protests must be peaceful. All right. So they are going to try to really milk this J6 thing as much as possible. Everything, if they can use the word Trump and peaceful together, right? It's a sort of a trigger for you to think, well, why does he have to be peaceful? Oh yeah, because he's violent. Oh yeah, because of J6. Oh yeah, insurrection, democracy, waking up in cold sweats like Nancy Pelosi does. Or Liz Cheney maybe is a better example. But they are going to continue to try to do that. Trump says things that are not different from the things the Democrats say, but the Democrats don't hem and haw about potential violence when they do it. So Chuck Schumer is pretty hilarious. You know, he knows what he's doing here. And we're going to have a fair trial and follows the facts and the law. The indictment doesn't even follow the facts or the law. Even Vox, the Washington Post, and Politico are confirming that. So nice job, Chuck Schumer. Now, I think Elon Musk actually responded to him about this. I could be wrong. Elon responded to somebody. Maybe it wasn't that one. We also had reaction from Thomas Massey. Massey said, Alvin Bragg should be disbarred and removed from office. I like it. This is an egregious abuse of the legal system for political purposes, and it threatens the fabric of our judicial system. It's true. I think it undermines the entire DA's office. I mean, if prosecutors are nothing but partisan political hacks who don't actually really care about equal justice, as they say they do, then what's the point of engaging with the justice system? The credibility, if a prosecutor brings charges and you're on a jury and you go, oh, this guy's bringing charges. This guy who's the same guy who prosecuted Trump and is letting all these criminals run free. You know, it just deflates the whole legitimacy of the institution, which is mostly what I think many are concerned about. The left is trying to frame this as though the right is concerned only about Donald Trump. They're just upset that their person got indicted, you know, their guy or whatever it is. No, that's not what we're concerned about. We're concerned, as we've been chronicling here for many years now, the continual weaponization of the government, starting with censorship and disinformation, starting with COVID, lockdowns, mandates, do this or else you lose that. We've seen what's happening with the J6ers. Everybody throughout this entire process, throughout the last 2-3 years now, has been going through this slow grinder, and now it's culminating. Things go slow and then they go fast. It's culminating in the indictment of Donald Trump and the arrest of the former president. And it's going to lead to another indictment and probably another one as they keep positioning the pieces around, taking over the justice system. It's bigger than that. And so when Republicans are out there not speaking out about that, they are missing that point, or they see the point, they're okay with it. They'd rather see Donald Trump just thrown by the wayside and the justice system be damned, because if the justice system serves the uniparty, then the uniparty is going to be afloat and they can keep out any threats. They want to pull the ladder up, and the justice system is another entity that they can compromise. So why not? Now, Byron Donald was hitting the media circuits, and he was explaining his take in the aftermath of the Trump arraignment.
Hillary Clinton spent $1 million on a fake dossier citing that he was a Russian plant. We all know that to be true. So it's okay to spend $1 million of campaign cash to create a phony dossier.
That was the Steele dossier. You remember the Steele dossier was the document that Hillary Clinton's campaign team assembled, and they tried to funnel that over to the FBI and tell the FBI that this was a legitimate research material, and then ask the FBI to open up an investigation so that they could then take that investigation over to the media and say, hey, the FBI is investigating Trump. They were trying to play both sides in order to shift the narrative of the electoral process. That was back in 2016. You talk about misinformation and disinformation. Then they lost the election, and then they went out and instituted new policies at social media companies. They started building new infrastructure to make sure that never happened again.
And spent $1 million on a fake dossier citing that he was a Russian plant. We all know that to be true. So it's okay to spend $1 million of campaign cash to create a phony dossier to secrete through the media to tilt the 2016 elections. But now we're going to say that there are booking irregularities about an NDA agreement between him and somebody else, and that's now hiding stuff from the people. I mean, this is a joke. It's a ridiculous. This is why this is a political persecution of Donald Trump.
Interesting that there are appearances on CNN of this variety. Yesterday, we also heard Alina Abba, I think, was on CNN, and Joe Tacopina was also on CNN. But Byron Donald is right. Major double standards. Hillary Clinton settles that off with an FEC fine, not a big deal, and Donald Trump gets prosecuted. Joe Biden engages in nice conversations and games of patty cake with FBI agents, or whatever happened there. We still don't really know. Robert Hur, special counsel, is investigating Biden's classified documents. But it's a nice, just, hand-holding session. Massages. Trump gets his house raided. Antifa gets a slap on the wrist. Kamala Harris supports fundraising efforts for the BLM protests, but the J6ers sit in solitary confinement. That's what we're talking about. It's the double standards. It happens, in this case, to be manifesting itself in the candidacy of Donald Trump and his supporters, but it's disgusting regardless, no matter where it goes. And they're the ones doing it. And they're the ones who are launching the mutually assured destruction efforts, and we'll see if the Republicans respond. But Byron Donald hits it on the head. James Comer was also speaking about this. He was on with Fox News.
He's overstepped. And I'll tell you one of the things that I don't think's been picked up a lot that's going to be a problem. And I had two calls yesterday, one from a county attorney in Kentucky and one from a county attorney in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. They were Republican, obviously. Both states are heavily Republican. They want to know if there are ways they can go after the Bidens now.
Good.
And they've opened up a can of worms. They've set precedents now that we can't go back on.
Good. Comer says that there are other DAs, other prosecutors around this country who want to take it to the Bidens. Good. Hopefully there's many more.
He's overstepped. And I'll tell you one of the things that I don't think's been picked up a lot that's going to be a problem. And I had two calls yesterday, one from a county attorney in Kentucky and one from a county attorney in Tennessee. Mm-hmm. They were Republican, obviously. Both states are heavily Republican. They want to know if there are ways they can go after the Bidens now.
How? Has Hunter been there, Tennessee? Has he been in that jurisdiction? Was he running his crack cocaine through there? I don't know. But if there's any nexus, if there's any jurisdiction, the Republican DAs they better do it, because equal standards should apply in the law. Now, to be perfectly honest, right, I actually don't think Trump should be prosecuted for something like this. I know a lot of lefties say, well, it is the law and everything. But I think there should be equal standards, and we should not overly prosecute people. I am a criminal defense attorney. There's been some serious cases here where we've talked on this channel about siding with people who are the defendants, who should be given, in my opinion, the benefit of the doubt regularly. But Trump, in this case, is not given that at all. And so, hey, if we're not going to give Trump the benefit of the doubt, better go after everybody else too. That is what Comer said, and I think he's right about it. And, it may not happen this cycle, but this will eventually become a part of the culture. This will be set as precedent. And precedent are like layers in the law, and it will be etched in the memory of how this country functions. And somebody else will latch onto it. Might not be this time, might be 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 12 years down the road. We don't know. But this is the new system now. We are prosecuting political opponents and presidential candidates for made up crimes that almost don't even have, as far as we can tell, any legal basis at all. We'll see what the judge says about it too. But to cross that bridge, the only justification for that, the only reason somebody could do that would be because they're political partisan hacks. Plenty of other crimes to prosecute, or they're just extremely bad with their judgment, and maybe they should not be a lawyer, one, or the DA for Manhattan. Senator Tom Cotton was also outraged about Alvin Bragg prosecuting Donald Trump.
Never before in American history has the party in power targeted a former president with criminal charges. Such an unprecedented step should not be taken lightly, but the indictment of Donald Trump is a joke. It should be dismissed immediately. First off, the so-called criminal charges are beyond New York's 5-year statute of limitations. Second, the legal theory is completely flawed. Their claim, I guess, since the indictment is so blank on the matter, is that Donald Trump should have used campaign funds for a personal matter. But the Department of Justice, even the Federal Election Commission, has refused to bring federal election criminal charges here. And then finally, consider the evidence here. You have the testimony of a woman who has repeatedly contradicted herself on this matter, and then the testimony not just of any convicted criminal, but a man who was convicted for lying under oath. This matter ought to be dismissed immediately.
Right on. Senator Tom Cotton. And he's fired up. Did you see that? Whew. He came prepared. He had his bullet points ready to go, and he hit them all on the mark. This case is a joke, and it should be dismissed. The fact that it's even gotten this far is a joke as well. It begs the question, why did they do this? What are they distracting from? Is this something that is strategic in some way that we're missing? Or are they really just that dumb? I don't know. Only time will tell. So that's Congress. Of course, we'll continue to cover what Congress is doing. In the White House, not much brain activity taking place there. We'll turn our attention to the two people we like to look at for some leadership, some answers, some guidance, because they are in the positions to do that. But we had questions about how Joe Biden found out about this story. Was he briefed on it? Did he know about Trump's arraignment? How did the whole thing go down? Karine gets asked.
As he was last week when the announcement was made of an indictment, he was of course briefed by his senior members of his staff, just like as we all found out. You all learned through reports, the media reporting, and that's all I have. I don't have anything more to share on that.
Nothing. Got it from the media, just like they get everything else. No questions asked that got any follow-up from Karine. Not going to comment on it from here. Now, Joe Biden, as you can see, he's barely alive, and his eyes are doing the thing that they do when he doesn't really know where he is. But there's a lot of noise happening in this room. He's sitting around playing, conversation with other world leaders who are competent. And a reporter asks a question as they throw them all out of the room, as they like to do, because they don't want you to see how incompetent he is behind the scenes. So they say, Mr. President, are you concerned that Trump's arraignment is going to change politics? Are you worried that this might be divisive? This might divide America? And watch Joe Biden's reaction. He definitely heard this one.
Is the indictment of your predecessor politically divisive?
He's pretty smiley there. Look at that. That's pretty smiley Joe. Just laughing it up. They're going to try to take him out for the next election so that they can shove this guy back in. Is that the plan? Or what's the deal? Is that why he's so happy? Almost giddy that his top political opponent, key rival, is now being prosecuted in America. Is that kind of the reaction you'd want from a country that's supposed to be a democratic country? The country that says to other countries around the world, hey, we're a shining beacon of democracy and liberal ideals. Don't prosecute your dictators, third world countries. And then they ask the current president about this. Do you feel like this is divisive or that it's wrecking your country? And he grins like a little demon. Just laughing. He's a total failure of the times. It's just an embarrassing joke that he's in charge. This is a pretty serious and somber event, unless he's just giddy because he knows the whole thing is already preordained and he has to just be placed in room to room. Pick him up, move him over here, pick him up, move him over here. That's all he's got to do. The rest of it is written already. We'll see. So those are the updates from Congress and the White House. We want to see what else is happening because Trump's defense team was assembling, and we want to get an update on what they're doing. Trump's lawyers discussed their strategy. After the arraignment, they popped outside and gave a press conference. We got a much better angle on this conversation this time. And you see in this frame, Joe Tacopina, the New York lawyer who has been long on Trump's team. And then we have the new addition, Todd Blanche, who is in this box here. And he was the latest addition. He just recently resigned from his law firm, came and joined the Trump defense team. And then off the frame, off camera, is going to be Susan Nicholas. She's here on the corner. You can see her hair sort of poking out a little bit. This is what they said immediately after the arraignment.
There was no admonishment
that the president not use language that would incite violence or civil unrest.
He did not request that the president not use language. He requested that everybody involved refrain from using language that's inappropriate. And by the way,
so this has been a talking point that the media has been using. Oh, the Trump judge told Trump, don't incite another insurrection, you insurrectionary maniac, that type of stuff. It never happened. Todd Blanche, Trump's defense lawyer, says, no, he didn't say, Trump, stop your mean truths. He said, everybody be very careful on this case, okay? It's a high-profile case. Exercise caution.
Did not use language. He requested that everybody involved refrain from using language that's inappropriate. And by the way, that includes the witnesses for the people who are talking just
but it
as much.
It also includes the former president swinging a baseball bat at the head of the Manhattan DA.
Well, I don't know where you got that, because if
that was a tweet sent out by the former president.
No, it wasn't. And first of all, that picture was not him swinging a baseball bat. I mean, if you want to distort the facts, go right ahead. I won't address that. Yes, it is. He wasn't swinging a baseball bat at anyone's head. That was a picture of him showing off an American-made bat. But someone else put a picture of the district attorney next to him, and in an article posted that. That's not his article.
We already debunked that here. We pulled up the story. Basically, what happens, when you share a story on social media, you just share a link. You've done this. And then the social media site will pull the story and it will pick an image, and then it will populate the image into the feed. And that's what Trump did. He shared a story, and somebody else, the author of the story. And I don't know if this happened before he posted the tweet or after the tweet, if he posted the truth with the link that had the bad photo, or if he posted the link, the author saw the link was posted and then updated the photo. I don't know. But regardless, the photo was a picture of Trump holding a bat. He's like, yeah, like this is a nice bat. And then it's just put next to a picture of Alvin Bragg. And they said that Trump made that picture and put it together and posted it. I'm going to murder him with a bat, and all this stuff. What are you talking about, weirdos? He just shared a link to the story, and then Trump even deleted that post because it was a problem. So that is Joe Tacopina explaining that.
Not using language that incites.
Guys, here's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about the insufficiency of this case. And I will say this to you. Today's unsealing of this indictment shows that the rule of law died in this country. Because while everyone is not above the law, no one's below it either. And if this man's name was not Donald J. Trump, there is no scenario we'd all be here today. Please understand that based on these charges.
True.
When? 8 o'clock.
What are we going to hear?
I don't know. You'll hear.
The trial
Can you?
January. Did you think that was realistic?
No.
Can you guys talk about, there's a lot of speculation about the unity among the defense attorneys.
Look at this. Look at us.
Love
it. Is that why
it.
you chose to do this?
Love it. Unity and harmony amongst the Trump defense team. They say, we love each other. We're prepared to defend the former president. Now, Glenn Beck had on Joe Tacopina on his show, and they had an interesting conversation. And I wanted to parse through some of this here Glenn Beck asks him a question about the strategy. What's the defense team's strategy? Are they going to be filing all sorts of motions, or how is this going to break down? Here is the conversation.
Look, here's the thing. We are going to be making ferocious motions in this case. They're going to cover every angle to get this ridiculous case thrown out of court. It doesn't belong in court. We are going to obviously consider whatever legal motions, including recusal, change of venue, if they're appropriate. Look,
isn't it appropriate? Don't you think the recusal of the judge? I mean, that's a conflict of interest. Like crazy.
You would think. And these facts came out, yesterday. That apparently his daughter works for the vice president. But again, we have to be very methodical in our attacks here. We don't want to do anything with a knee-jerk reaction. We don't want to make emotional decisions, and we'll do all the research and everything we need to do. We have obviously several months to make these motions, and we're going to take our time and do them right, because you have one bite at this apple, and there is no scenario where we're going to miss anything. And any angle that we can take that legitimizes our legal attacks on this case, that I know is going to be successful, because I don't think this case is ever going to see a jury, Glenn. I really don't. It shouldn't see a jury, but we would need to have intellectually honest judges to make sure that happens, and hopeful that we're going to have one here.
Hopefully they get a good judge that is intellectually honest, is what he said. He probably knows this judge. I don't know why he wouldn't know the judge. He's been practicing there for a long time, and I think the judge has some experience already on other Trump cases. So I think that's exactly the right take, to be perfectly honest with you, that it is slow. I know a lot of people are outraged and a lot of people want to see immediate action, but from what we see here, I do think it's appropriate to be slow, methodical, strategic. We know that these next upcoming dates and motions deadlines are not even for a long time, and there's no real reason to rush it. We'll see what his lawyers do. It could be quick and easy. It could be a statute of limitations issue. Filed, dismissed, next case. We'll see. Now, we turn our attention to Alina Abba. Alina Abba is one of Trump's most brilliant legal theorists, and she was on with Tucker Carlson explaining her reaction and the Trump team's reaction to the arraignment, the prosecution by Alvin Bragg.
So unless we're misreading this, the actual crime is not listed in the indictment? How can that be?
He's a dummy.
It's unreal. Honestly, Tucker, let's talk about what we can see in the indictment, which is the years and the dates. And I'm no crazy, brilliant human being, but I'm pretty sure I know how to read a calendar. So Alina, we have dates going in February 2017 for a few months there. Where was President Trump in February 2017? In the Oval Office. Okay, so what they're saying is there were checks written to his former lawyer while he was in the Oval Office. That's in Washington, D.C. So just on its face, what we do know from this, what he failed to put in was any factual basis, of course, as you pointed out. But what we do know, Tucker, is that he was sitting in the Oval Office. Now, explain to me how that's campaign finance interference, how that affected the election when everyone knew about Stormy in 2016. It makes no sense on its face, which is probably why it's intentionally vague.
Yeah, well, you have to ask what is the crime that he's charging, and then what would be sufficient to prove that crime? It's the falsifying of the business records in order to conceal or to commit another crime. And he has said that it was to conceal information from the 2016 election, but not really. Everybody was talking about Stormy Daniels. So what was concealment? What was concealment? What's the standard of that next election crime? How do you fill that bucket? You can get a DUI if you drive over a certain limit. What is concealment for election crimes under the standard in New York? Well, they haven't told us what the charge is, so we can't look at the statute to see what the standard is. And they don't know what it is either over at the Team Trump.
Well, sure. I mean, do companies commit federal crimes when they have their employees sign non-disclosure agreements? As every single one of them does every single day? Probably not. Look, if Trump had committed a crime and they were alleging it, I would not defend him. If he was caught bribing someone or hurting someone or stealing money.
Correct.
But this doesn't even approach the appearance of a crime, which is the scariest part. This is just election interference. Am I missing something?
No, you're not, Tucker. You're exactly right, Tucker. Thanks for having me on. In fact, we've taken a lot of looks at what Michael Cohen has signed himself. He is the key witness. He's the only person listed in the indictment. And he signed material saying he waived privilege. He was working with Robert Costello, had conversations with Robert Costello. Robert Costello even presented his version of the conversation to the grand jurors and explained to them that Cohen told him Trump had no involvement with this at all. It was regular routine business. And if you look at the indictment, it goes even further than that. It's a recurring 3 felonies every month, which is consistent with a retainer agreement that the Trump organization might have with Michael Cohen. So we don't even need to look at what was wrong beyond these other election charges, because facially, it appears that there is no retainer problem because there is more or less a retainer relationship. Now, again, in New York, I don't know if you have to have a documented retainer in order to execute legal services with a lawyer, but I can't imagine that is a requirement. And if it is, I can't imagine that that is a felony requirement that they're prosecuting other lawyers for engaging in relationships with their clients on a cash basis or on a verbal contract basis. Because if you're paying a monthly retainer, you just stop. If they stop paying the retainer, the lawyer just stops performing the services. So it all fits perfectly within the realm of legality. Everything they're alleging here is garbage.
No, you're not missing anything. And by the way, in order to have an effective NDA, you should probably have some consideration, which is called money, right? So for all the non-lawyers, we do this all the time. We do this all the time. And when you have somebody extorting you, which Mark Pomerantz said in his book, he believed this to be, and I recommend that you all take a close look at that. He lays this out. We had Michael Cohen, who was a convicted felon and liar, who was afraid of what was going to happen to his wife. We have Mark Pomerantz admitting that they couldn't bring charges. Neither could the FEC, who regulates this. Alvin Bragg stood up today and said he was bringing a state federal crime. That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. It's federal crime. It's not a state crime. It's
Tucker's laughing too. They're both having fun. It's the most ridiculous thing. What a joke this is. Okay, so they are trying to figure it out. We're all trying to figure it out. Nobody really knows what the heck's going on over there in Alvin Bragg's office. But all right, we'll continue to follow. Trump's lawyers will have some additional motions to file very soon. Of course, we'll continue to cover that one. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for liking this video wherever it is you're watching it. All right. And we had, of course, one final article before we change and go over to the Proud Boys, because Trump is not out of the woods on this New York case, by a long shot. It just got started. It looks weak as hell, but there's more to come. In fact, while Trump was being arraigned, there was a very, very bad ruling that came out against him in the special counsel prosecution. And Politico reported on this. They tell us Pence is not going to appeal the ruling. So Pence could appeal this and stop this whole process. But why would he do that? He would benefit by Trump being thrown out of the race, I'm sure. So Pence is not going to appeal this. There's a rule that was requiring him to testify. He said that he had executive privilege. The court heard the case. He appealed it. Well, let's read the article. Mike Pence has decided against appealing this other order. Vice President Pence will not appeal the judge's ruling, said his spokesman on Wednesday. The decision follows an unprecedented but secret ruling by Chief Judge James Boasberg, requiring Pence's testimony, but limiting some topics. Trump and Pence had both challenged the subpoena on distinct grounds. Trump said his conversations were shielded by executive privilege, which was intended to keep confidentiality in presidential communications. Trump has lost a series of those fights. A lot of his other executives are going to be testifying against him, or at least in the proceedings. Pence argued a different reason. He said he was protected by legislative immunity and the speech and debate clause. But the judge said no. Another first, right? For the first time in American history, Boasberg found, they have some congressional immunity, but not a lot. Opens Pence up to questions about legislative duties they had hoped would be shielded. In the court's decision, they say that principle prevailed. They say this affirms that this extends to the vice president, that the protection extends to him. Yeah, but not a lot of it. Still means he's likely to testify. Trump might appeal the ruling. Pence has signaled he's willing to testify to a grand jury that weren't shielded by privilege. But then Pence is going to be the subject of this inquisition. Jack Smith, the special counsel, is going to be asking Mike Pence about what Trump told him to do. And this one will certainly come down the pike. So that was the update on Donald Trump. His prosecution will continue. Of course, we'll continue to cover it. Thank you for liking this video and subscribing wherever it is you are watching it. Now, we are going over to another prosecution, and we have some very interesting news. The Ray Epps subpoena was denied in the Proud Boys trial. And are you even surprised a little bit? We're going to take a look at the actual order that came out from Judge Kelly. There was a ruling about access to what's been going on in the Proud Boys trial. Even the media wants to know about it. But the order from the judge said, no, you don't get to hear anything about what's going on. And we'll turn our attention to days 50 and 51 in what happened in the Proud Boys trial. We have the defense coming to a close. We'll see where we are. Roger Parloff, who we've been following this entire time, is still out with a family personal issue. And so we're sending our thoughts and prayers out to Roger Parloff. Hopefully he is well or on the way to being well very, very soon. But the big story is that the subpoena that the Proud Boys wanted to send to Ray Epps has been denied. This was the order from the court. The minute order denying the motion ordering service. And the way this whole thing came about was, remember, Ray Epps lives here in Arizona, according to many reports, and they've been having a difficult time getting him personally served. They want a subpoena to be handed to him so that they say, you've been ordered by a judge to be here. Then a process server will notify the court and say, hey, judge, I guarantee you I gave Ray Epps a copy of your subpoena, and he knows he needs to be here. So then what happens is, if Ray Epps doesn't show up, the defense can say, judge, we need a warrant for our client. He was served a subpoena. He had personal knowledge, personal notice that he needed to be in court to testify, and he didn't show up. So go and arrest him. But they can't get to him. The process server has been going around his residence. Apparently, he's got padlocks on his gates, according to the defense motion. And there's other security measures that he has apparently implemented to not be served. This is all according to the defense motion. And so the defense was asking the court to give them permission to publish this, to just put it in the newspaper, just post it online, send it all over the media, and consider that to be service by publication, which in other cases is a valid way of serving somebody when you can't get them. Because what kind of a country is it? What kind of a system is it if all you have to do is just run away and dodge service, and you don't have to participate in any criminal trials, even though you were highly involved in the so-called insurrection? Kind of a weird system, right? So in other words, all Ray Epps has to do is just hang tight, because the judge denied service by publication, saying you're not allowed to just publish something and serve them that way, even though that is valid service in other types of cases. The judge wrote, says defendant Pizzola wanted to serve Ray Epps by publication and didn't want to personally hand him the documents. He says that this person has been dodging service by a retained process server. Even if true, the judge says, the defense has proffered no authority that would allow a defendant in a criminal case to serve a trial subpoena by publication. He points to one case which was only authorized to serve Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda. But the federal rules are much more limited, and the judge references some case law. He says, therefore, it is hereby ordered that the defense motion for an order serving Ray Epps is denied. Now, it's a service by publication. I don't know if there has been another personal service authorization to go physically serve Ray Epps, but I would presume that that has been asked for. And I have seen some photographs on the internet floating around that look like a valid subpoena, but I haven't been able to authenticate it. But as far as we know now, as long as Ray Epps doesn't get served, the judge is not going to allow service by publication. Denied. And that's not good news for the defense because they have been cut off from many lines of questioning, inquisitions into confidential human sources, discussions about deleted evidence and spreadsheets and other things. Now, if you look at the court docket, there's been a lot of activity, lot of filings. Most of the time, we're talking about jury instructions. And these jury instructions are being hashed out by the parties right now. And if we go over to the docket and we take a look at the most recent filings, we see that today they had proceedings. We're going to take a look at the proceedings quickly, but I wanted to share this motion with you as well. So here, look, we've got the New York Times, NBC, LA Times, Gray Media, Dow Jones, CBS, BuzzFeed, Associated Press, ABC, all of the people. They're all on here. They say, Your Honor, we would like some access to this trial. You haven't really been giving us any access. They filed that on April 5th because a lot of the proceedings have been closed. And here's what they said in their filing. The media wrote, in the case of the Proud Boys, they said, Your Honor, we are filing as a coalition of the press a motion for access to the April 5th hearing. That's today. They wanted access to something. There was a hearing scheduled today. We don't really know what it was about. Neither do they. They say, pursuant to the local rules, all of the media companies, you see them all listed here, HuffPo, LA Times, New York, Vox, Washington Post, all of us, respectfully move the court to ensure that the hearing set for today at 11 a.m. will be open to the press and to the public. Says that yesterday, Your Honor, the court has previously excluded members of the media from proceedings with this case without any prior notice or without any opportunity for the press to even be heard. And the issue is going to be discussed again this morning. So you threw us out yesterday and you're going to throw us out again today? But we're saying, no, you can't throw us out without any notice. We're the press, baby. We have a right. They wanted access to the 11 a.m. hearing today. Here's the background. They say, well, January 6th was very important. Our FBI is still hyperventilating about it. They say that this case involves January 6th defendants. We know them as the defendants in this case. They were allegedly there that day and involved. And they say that yesterday, Judge Kelly sealed the courtroom for more than 3 hours without explanation. What? The sealed hearing is not documented on the public docket, which is what we just looked at here. So we can't even see it. What were they talking about yesterday? What were they talking about again today? And although not documented on the public docket, the court has indicated it's also going to seal the courtroom today for a hearing on another unknown matter. Strange. Now, in addition to yesterday's sealing, the court has previously sealed hearings and excluded the press and the public from attending the hearings in high-profile cases without notice. Specifically, the court did not indicate in advance that a motions hearing held back in November would be closed to the public, but the court just closed it anyways. And the court also told the journalists who attempted to object to that closure that they must file a motion to lodge those objections. That came from Kyle Cheney from Politico. So indeed, the press coalition motion seeking access to the transcript of that sealed hearing and any exhibits presented at that sealed hearing remains pending to this day. So we can't even see what's going on. They are prosecuting the Proud Boys, and how much of this is happening under seal? And why would it be happening under seal? If this is such a cut and dry case of a conspiracy, where a bunch of people got together and decided they were going to insurrect America, why is everything so closed? Why don't they just present the evidence to us? The proceedings are not televised. There's no audio. There's no reproduction. People have limited access to the courts. They don't even give you the transcript from the sealed proceedings with redactions. It's totally lacking in transparency. Why is that? Is it the FBI needing to protect their sources and methods? Why do they need to protect all of their sources and methods in this case if in other cases they can tell us about them in other ways and tell us what's going on? We can see full trials on display. Why is that? Is it all of their confidential human sources, or is it all of their deleted evidence, or is it all of their hidden spreadsheet rows, or is it all of the people who were getting paid by the FBI when they were showing up at meetings with attorneys and at prayer group sessions? They're not even allowing the fake news media to get access to this stuff. This judge won't. Now, as the court knows, the press coalition has sought to vindicate the First Amendment and the common law rights of access. The motion asserts the same rights. These are the rights under the First Amendment. Give us right to see what you're doing. Now, because the press is being denied access, they say trial proceedings cannot be closed unless there are specific on the records findings made. Has the judge done that, or is it all just under secret? There are compelling interests. There's no alternative to get this stuff. There's no limitation. They say the Supreme Court told us that the court should take every reasonable measure to accommodate public attendance at criminal trials. They don't take any of them. We can't see it. They don't televise it. They don't publicize it. You can't live stream it. You can't photograph it. You can't do anything. They keep it under secret, especially the federal courts. The press coalition, therefore, respectfully requests the court take every reasonable measure to accommodate the press. And for the foregoing reasons, we ask that we have access to the hearing to date on April 5th, 2023. Thank you for your attention to this matter, court. Your friend, Charles D. Tobin. Now, what do you think happened when the court proceedings started this morning? The press said, did you get our motion, Your Honor? Did you get a chance to take a look at that? And the judge said, yeah, I read that this morning when I was having my coffee. I looked at that. And Jordan Fisher says, bright and early, Judge Kelly denied a motion from the press, which 4 out of the 5 defendants joined to keep the proceeding open. Just said, no, it's too secret. The FBI and the DOJ, they say that they need this closed or else the country's going to die. We're all going to die. Now, without going into detail, the DOJ argued that, quote, there was no other way to protect the integrity of these proceedings. No other way to protect the integrity of these proceedings than going under seal, and Judge Kelly agreed. So it's coming from the DOJ. The judge is giving the DOJ the benefit of the doubt and just saying, well, they said this is very secret. You know, they needed to protect the integrity of the proceedings, and it's under seal. We, the American people, don't get to see anything about what's going on. Fortunately, Brandy Buckman was there for trial day 50. These are the events that led up to the sealing of the court. And she is here reporting. We fast forward until Judge Kelly gets on the bench. And of course, make sure that you are following Brandy Buckman on Twitter. Now, she posted this. She said, Roger is not with us. And I mentioned this earlier, but Roger Parloff, he said that I won't be live here today. Hopefully resuming next week. Roger's been with this trial from the very beginning. So prayers for Roger and his family. Now, Brandy says that all the parties finally arrive, including defendant Pizzola and attorney Metcalf. Away we go. Judge Kelly says, all right, everybody, it's good to see you back here in court today. All right, I've gotten everybody's emails over cross, and I've got to say that, you know, having read all this material about the cross-examination of this upcoming witness, I think that all of it, maybe not all of it, but virtually all of it, I'm going to exclude, and let me explain why. So apparently, the government wanted to dive into this whole tangent during a cross-examination, and Judge Kelly says no. Wow. Judge Kelly says, well, you know, I think Carmen Hernandez is right. Who is this? Who is this judge? Judge Kelly, is that you? Somebody tap him on the head. Says, I think Miss Hernandez is right. Wow. His testimony did not amount to a sort of character for nonviolence testimony that would, as we've discussed with other witnesses she would call, that would open the floodgate. Says, I went back, I looked at the testimony. She accomplished some things, but around the edges, I acknowledge all the way in which she asked about gathering in Vegas, and she sort of skirted the topic of violence. And she's referencing Carmen Hernandez, saying, okay, Carmen, she kind of was getting close to the talk about violence, but didn't get there. And so we're not allowing you to cross-examine him about violence. Says, I don't think that it's open season to show violence. Okay. We're not going into all of it, especially when it's not connected to the core issues of the case. He says, and also on this doxing issue, he says, there were times when the defendants expressed support for violence post-election in connection with the election results and their response to them. And that's one thing, but this is something totally different. I just don't think the witness testimony opens the door to that. And so the prosecutor's like, they're ridiculous, Judge. Meanwhile, they've been winning every motion this entire time. We can't believe it. Carmen's like, holy crap, this is amazing. Wow. So Kelly says, okay, so there were some other issues that we were working through. One was regarding the Ministry of Self-Defense chat. He says, we all know what the forms say and what they don't say. I did look at this, and this witness said, I looked at the transcripts. He says, I don't remember joining, and apparently I've never posted there. And he was days away from leaving the club the entire time. And he says, so the government, they could play or they could talk about exhibits that sort of talk about this. Some particular exhibits have been excluded because they were free-floating odes to violence, but they didn't connect to J6 or to the tools theory that they are using. So Kelly is still going through the preliminaries. He says, and so also with regard to January 6th, he said the witness was already gone from the club by then. So I didn't see the basis to toll through things that were happening that day, and we don't need to go through all of it. So it's not beyond the scope in its relevance. And if it's not that, then it's 403. And so there's just a couple of chains. And so there's no reason getting into any of this. This is why he left. And Kelly continues. He says the next witness is going to be a character witness. And a character witness is coming in to talk about a defendant's character. He says if it's only a character for truthfulness, that's one thing. But a character witness for other character traits might open the door wide open on this. But I don't think this witness did. And the prosecutor's chiming in. He says, Your Honor, look, okay, yeah, all right, I understand. He says, I respect and I understand this ruling, but okay, understood. So there is no subject we should go into on cross with this witness because his testimony was generally non-relevant to this case. Prosecutor says, what I hand over to the defense is everything we have on this witness about violence and law enforcement. I don't get a proffer on on what this witness will testify to. Prosecutor sounds frustrated. The judge is saying that if he would have objected yesterday, he could have pursued that line of question that Kelly is now ruling out. Kelly says, I appreciate that. But again, it would be out on scope. It would be out on relevance. It would be out on 403. So you couldn't have got it in if you did something different yesterday. Prosecutor says, well, Judge, to the extent we hear any testimony on gatherings, like the one Carmen Hernandez talked about yesterday, that portrays the Proud Boys as a nonviolent club, can we talk about that? Says Hernandez does the performance point very well, but she's very experienced and knows how to elicit what she wants to elicit in closing. And says, I respect her for that very much, but Your Honor, we're trying to counter that. So he's saying that Carmen got really close to the line. So let's pause for a minute here. There's a conversation about this prior witness and whether they can ask him about other violent activities. Carmen was asking him questions that was kind of getting close to being in or around events that might have led to violent activities. And he was talking about, we're a nonviolent club, but he was close to some of these violent things. And so Carmen said, well, I didn't ask him about any of those things. So I didn't open the door on cross-examination to allow the prosecutor to get into those topics. The prosecutor said, yeah, you did. You kind of did by getting close enough. The judge said, well, I thought about it. she didn't get that close. And so I'm not going to allow you to get into those other things. It's too unrelated. And the prosecutor is upset. He says, Judge, this is what Carmen does. She's very sneaky. She does this performance point very well. All right. She gets up there and she dances the line. She knows how to elicit what she wants. And then in closing, she's going to come and try to hammer it home. But I'm trying to counter that here, right? It's almost like he's accusing her of spreading misinformation or something. Kelly says, whatever she accomplished by saying the Proud Boys got together, I'm sure it accomplishes very much, putting aside relevance. So prosecutor's still complaining, says, so I assume you'll sustain the objection if I ask about that video then? I don't want to go to the sidebar for the entire day. He's just pouting now. I'm happy to get up and thank the man for his testimony and sit down. He is pouting. Man, they don't like to lose a ruling. You see, this is why judges, they have a hard time ruling against the government because they act like whiny children. I assume you'll sustain the objection then if I ask about the video, he says. So let's just get that out of the way right now. And I don't want to go to a sidebar for the entire day. I mean, if you want me to ask him questions, Judge, I'm happy to get up and say thank you for your testimony and then sit back down. What a baby. So prosecutor says, but one thing I'd like to ask him about is the second-degree initiation, what it takes to be third and fourth and what it takes to get into that. I suspect he'd say he'd have to get into a physical altercation to support the cause. Kelly says, okay, that's fine. I don't understand why he can't testify to that. And so it's finally, all right, bring the jury in. Enough with the preliminary stuff. So we get back and the witness is back on the stand. It's Demetrius Robbins. And the prosecutor asks some questions. He says, okay, Demetrius, you testified about being present at a gathering in Las Vegas, trying to show violence. He says, yeah. And that had nothing to do with January 6th, right? Yeah. But you were present in Washington, D.C. on the 4th, weren't you? Yeah. It had nothing to do with January 6th. I was just there watching fireworks, but nothing to do with the 6th. Yeah. Now, you were going to Zachary Reel's house for Christmas, didn't you? Yeah. And that had nothing to do with 1-6? He says, no. Do you remember the Ministry of Self-Defense chat form? He says, I remember the form, but I don't remember signing it. Do you remember being in the chat for MOSD? He says, that's what it's called? He says, you keep saying Ministry of Self-Defense. What do you mean by that? Now, the prosecutor is explaining that. And Robbins is being very curt, right? He's saying, hey, listen, prosecutor, you keep asking me about these stupid forms. I signed a form and entered the group. Yes. Yeah, I'm cutting you off. You keep saying Ministry of Self-Defense. That's what it's called. You don't have to keep reiterating it. And he's getting irritated because he doesn't like that he keeps bringing up the phrase. And this is what the prosecutor does, right? The prosecutor is going to say, it's kind of like what they do with the war in Ukraine. You know how they always say illegal and unprovoked war in Ukraine before everything they say? Just to kind of keep saying it, right? Just to keep kind of programming you. Oh, yeah, that's why the illegal and unprovoked war in Ukraine. And you start at, oh, is it really illegal? Is it really unprovoked? That's weird. They keep saying it. Is that true? I don't know. But the prosecutor knows if they keep saying it, it's going to say self-defense, 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 self-defense to the jurors. And he's going to make violence in their minds, just like what they're trying to do to us with this illegal and unprovoked crap. So he says, did you participate in these groups? And Robbins is upset. He says, you keep repeating yourself. Stop with this crap. So you left the MOSD before 1-6? He says, yeah, I did. And you don't remember any communications in those Telegram groups, right? He says, for what? Messages? For what? In the lead up to January 6th. He says, there was no January 6th. I don't understand what you're saying. It happened when it happened, says Robbins. Prosecutor is frustrating. He says, look, I'm asking you about the message groups that you were in. Okay. There was messages between 1-6 and 1-1 and 1-6. Do you remember any communications with the Proud Boys preparing for 1-6? Defense attorney Pattis, objection, foundation, judge says overruled, carry on. So Robbins says, repeat the question, man. What did you say? McCullough says, Do you remember any groups you were in from 1-1 to 1-6 where the Proud Boys were discussing the trial or the January 6th? Objection, sidebar. Sidebar's over. Prosecutor goes back, brings up an exhibit for Demetrius. It's a chat. Hernandez stands up. Objection, Your Honor. The chat's from December 27th. He's not even in the chat. Overruled. Hernandez keeps going. Judge, but I am objecting. He's not in the chat. Objection, overruled. Objection, overruled. Carmen, Hernandez, sit down. Prosecutor says, can you confirm you're not in this chat right here? He says, yeah, my name's not there. So you don't know what was being said in the chat then. He says, for what? He says, you keep saying Ministry of Self-Defense. I was in one of them. I don't know which names. He says, okay, listen, Demetrius, you have nothing to offer this jury about statements being made in the chat. He says, I don't know. Objection, overruled. You have nothing to offer the jury in boots on the ground. You weren't in the boots on the ground chat. He says, how can I offer anything that I wasn't involved in? Prosecutor. But you did testify about what it takes to become a member of the Proud Boys, right? Yeah. Good. Well, I want to show you this video. Looks like it's a Proud Boys video in Philly at American Legion Hall. He says, hey, Demetrius, it looks like some people are wearing a distinctive shirt, circling a pipe on the shirt. He says, you see that? He says, yeah, of course, I wrote it. He says, not everyone wears that shirt, though. Is that right? Not everyone. Not the newbies, says Robin. So they need to achieve some status before they put that shirt on. Robin's tone is dripping with disdain and impatience today at this prosecutor. He says they got to make a certain amount of meetings. Yeah. In the video, Zachary Real, who is a defendant in this case, is describing to the third-degree Proud Boy, you got to get a tattoo. Is that true? You have to get a tattoo? He says, yeah. When McCullough says you have to permanently ink the body, he says, yeah. Now, in order to become a fourth-degree Proud Boy, you have to take certain actions, don't you? Yeah. You have to engage in some sort of conflict on behalf of the club. He says, we don't engage in conflict unless provoked. Good answer. Robbins can't answer about the fourth degree. He says, well, what about the fourth degree? I can't answer about that. I never made it that far. I left before I got there. Now, McCullough touches a nerve. He asks Robbins if he was in D.C. on 1/6. He says, were you in D.C. on January 6th? He says, you like investigations, don't you? I see you digging for something you're not going to get. No, I wasn't here. You want police reports? There's a bunch of crosstalks and objections. And Robin turns to the judge. And he says, the best I could hear, you like overruled. I got you. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. I can't even take it. The judge just got told by Demetrius in court, you like overruled. I got you. Okay, because the defense is objecting to protect Demetrius, and the judge is overruling the defense, which is making it harder on Demetrius. So he turns to the judge and he says, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. You like overruled. I got you. I see how this is going now. It all makes sense. He just told the judge, I would love to see this, man. Why can't we see the judge's face? McCullough says, you don't know what people were saying on the ground on 1/6, right? He says, I wasn't there. How the hell am I going to know now? More crosstalk. Robbins is fired up. He says, on January 6th, I was watching TV like everybody else. You got a problem with that? He says, your cousin, though, came, Isaiah Giddings. He came to D.C. on 1/6. Yeah. You were concerned about your cousin? Oh, yeah, of course I was. No further questions from the prosecutor. So Carmen Hernandez gets up, direct ends and begins rather quickly. 1 objections. She starts asking about other meetings. She says, The government asked why you left the Proud Boys. He says, because of my religious beliefs. Nothing further from me. Now, Brandy says, I also couldn't hear the full remark, but Robbins also made a brief wisecrack, half under his breath, about D.C. juries to Judge Kelly after the cross was getting a bit hectic. Oh, my gosh. Oh, man. Robbins made a wisecrack. These friggin' D.C. jurors, too. What are they going to do? You know, and Judge is like, I don't even want to know what the judge said. Now, he's done. No further questions from Carmen Hernandez. Shout out to Demetrius Robbins out there. You like overruled. I got you. Oh, boy. Next witness is up on the stand. The defense brings out Carmen Hernandez, calls to the podium, to the stand, says, Your Honor, the defense calls Jonathan Wynn, male, 41 years old, average height, married, newborn, and says, what were you doing when your child was born? Well, I was going to school, but I took some time off, says Jonah. I wanted to be a stay-at-home dad. You know, I was studying business management. Nice. Congratulations on the newborn. Jonah says, do you know Zachary Real? He says, yeah, I love the guy. He's effusive on this, laughing and smiling. Yeah, he's great. He's a great dude. Love Zach. How long have you known Zach? He says, I've known him since 2009. And how did you meet? Through prior military service. Wynn served in the U.S. Navy 2008 to 2016. Thank you for your service. He was a field combat medic, didn't go overseas. Now, Wynn says Marines don't have their own medical unit, and so the Navy provides it for them. Says I was stationed in Yuma, shout out to Arizona, where I met Zach. Now, your job at the time, how was it that you met Real? Well, he says I was attached to a Marine Corps unit. Same base as Real, when Real was a Marine stationed out in Arizona, shout out. We've been friends ever since 2009. We still talk, and he came back over in 2020, back to my home state in Washington. So in 2020, Real, who came to visit you, and somebody else, who was it? Amanda, his wife. Well, tell me more about Zach. Well, he's a great person. You know, he'll give you the shirt off his back. He's always been there. I've always asked him for advice on the VA stuff. He's been very knowledgeable and smart. He says, is he an honest guy? He says, oh my gosh, yeah, I would trust him with my baby. It's a nice endorsement. No further questions. Prosecutor McCullough comes back up. He says, now, Mr. Wynn, you're not a Proud Boy, are you? He says, yeah, I am. I'm a second degree. I belong to the Mount Baker chapter. He says, now you only recognize Zach here today in the courtroom? He says, yeah. Was he in the Ministry of Self-Defense? He says, no. Were you in the Ministry of Self-Defense? No. Did you participate in Boots on the Ground? No. He says, a prosecutor says, well, just by the look on your face. And Wynn says, well, you know, look, well, to be honest, I don't know what you're talking about, honestly. He says, I didn't go to DC on 1-6 and I wasn't in any of the chats. So I don't even know what you're talking about, says Wynn. He's laughing easily. He seems genuinely surprised. I don't even know what you're talking about. Prosecutor is a little frustrated right now. He says, this is the most intense time you spent with Real was when he was in Yuma in 2009, 2012. He says, yeah. Wynn says that we talked over the phone, we text, but we never Real visited back in Washington 2020. What did you guys talk about? Any Proud Boy stuff? He says, nope, no Proud Boy stuff. No further questions. Defense is back out. On redirect, asks Wynn if he feels like he knows Real. He says, yeah. And that's that. Now, we change defense attorneys. Nick Smith requests a sidebar, and another witness comes. Carmen Hernandez continues. The defense is going to call Henry William McGill. Tall, thin, 40-year-old, unmarried black man without kids. He's wearing a Bills jersey. They say, hey, Henry, how are you? Where'd you come from? He says, well, how'd you meet Zach? He says, I met Zach about in Yuma, Arizona, back in service at the time at the Marine Corps. And how long did you serve in the Marines? He says, almost 5 years. And then I signed a re-enlistment. I was deployed to Japan for 2 years. Didn't see combat. McGill did basic training. He says, I did basic training Flight equipment training, Pensacola, #1 in his class. He chose where to be deployed. He chose Japan. He always dreamt about the place and wanted to see it. Maybe the cherry blossoms? He says, yeah, that's a big part of it. So you served in Japan for 2 years and then you came back? He says, yeah. I returned to Cherry Point, North Carolina. And what happened after that? Well, a piece of the unit had been loaned to the unit in Yuma, and that's when we met. We were met when we were out partying. Remember when that was? It had to be around 2010, 2011, somewhere around that time. Did there come a time when you left the service and when you met up with Real? He says, yeah, I got accepted to Temple University right as my contract, right at the end, and I decided to take that opportunity. Now, you said at the end of your service, you served 2 tours in the Marines. But were you less than honorably discharged? He said, yeah, unceremoniously. When I came back from Japan, North Carolina, more specifically, yeah, it was a situation here. I left to go to Philly. I had a friend there, so So the reason for your less than honorable discharge is because you smoked marijuana? Wow. He says, yes, I had to. I thought it was the best decision. That's the real racism. He says, when I came back upon Real at Temple University, it was total happenstance. Carmen says, do you have any musical talent? He says, yeah, I do. Since the 5th grade. What kind of music? He says, lyrical poetry. Others might say hip hop. How long at Temple were you in contact with Real? The whole time. We would stay in touch, phone, text message all the time. I performed at a bar in Pennsylvania, one that Zachary Real co-owns called Bada Bing. They had a menu, they had drinks. They said that he was a promoter there for 3 to 4 months and then left for Philly. He says, well, what do you think about Zach Real? Carmen asks. I have a very high opinion of his integrity, a very high opinion of his truthfulness. Everything he said he would do, he did it. He never went back on his word. He always followed through. No further questions. Prosecutor comes up, starts cross-examination. They talk about the bills. Oh, the bills, how are they doing? I just wanted to make sure I understand this. Now, you spent time with Zach in Yuma and then joined him back at Temple. Is that true? Yeah. You stayed in touch by phone, right? Yeah. Now, in reviewing the phone records that we looked at, you didn't talk to him too much in November, December 2020, did you? We talked a little bit, but you didn't talk much, right? He says, yeah, that's correct. Was McGill part of the Proud Boys in 2020? Were you part of the Proud Boys? He says, no, I've never been part of the Proud Boys. Not part of any chats? No. Did you know anything that Real said in any of the chats? You didn't know anything about the chats, right? Right. You were not in DC on 1/6, right? Right. You don't know anything that Zach Real did on 1/6, right? Right. And you weren't with him on the march to the Capitol, were you either? Right. You don't know anything he said or did that day. He says, well, I do know that he led a group prayer of some sort. That's the only thing. Mr. Real led a group prayer, he asks. Yeah, I saw a video of it. And you've not been in this courtroom since January of this year, right? Yeah. And you haven't seen any of the evidence. Objection, sidebar. You have not been here since January 6th. You've not heard evidence coming into this case, right? Right. Hernandez comes back up for a redirect. She says, have you had any contacts with Real until today? Yeah. And you attended Black Lives Matter events? No. Your contact with Real was regarding the military, right? Bar, Temple, conversations, and all of that stuff, right? Yeah. No further questions. Now, Judge Kelly breaks for a brief sidebar. We're nearing the morning break hour. We're moving so fast today, Real's witnesses managed to escape a lengthy examination. Judge Kelly tells the jury that they're going to tell him about a stipulation, which is an agreement between the parties. Here is a stipulation. It's about Biggs, who's a defendant, about his biographical details. So the defense attorneys and the prosecutors got together and they said, here's what we can agree upon. These are facts. 1, Biggs enlisted in the U.S. Army, November 9, 2004. Upon completing basic, joined the 82nd Airborne. While there, deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, 2 years, 2 months. This is Pattis reading this. He says, ladies and gentlemen, during Biggs' service in Afghanistan, he received a Purple Heart and he was discharged in 2012 due to non-combat related injuries. Was a staff sergeant. He became an online journalist after discharge. After the 2016 election, he began to work as an online personality for InfoWars. His deployment ended in 2017. In 18, Biggs moved from Austin to Florida. He has a 5-year-old daughter. Next, he brings it up for his next client. Kelly says, you'll have copies of these, ladies and gentlemen, when this moves forward. Now, Pattis has another stipulation, so that's some facts about Biggs. Pattis continues. He says, now we also agree, this is interesting, the government and the defendant Biggs agree and stipulate that confidential human sources, in quotes, informants, are used by the FBI to gather information that the FBI uses to investigate crimes and to monitor potential threats of domestic or national security concerns. They use CHSs governed by guidelines by the Attorney General of the United States. Any individual who provides useful, credible info to the FBI for authorized collection activity, it goes on, but it's too fast on the screen. She can't capture it all. And we'll see if we can get the documents. But it's about confidential human sources. And this is what's going to be landing in front of the jury. It's like a document. It is a document with notes in there. These are facts that you can consider in this case. We'll see if we can dig up that document. It also stipulates that between or on November 3rd and January 6th, look at this, the FBI maintained at least 8 confidential human sources, including Aaron, who provided reporting on or about the Proud Boys. One more time. A stipulation between the prosecutors and the defense says between November 3rd and January 6th, at least 8 confidential human sources were maintained by the FBI, all providing reporting on or about the Proud Boys. There are only 5 Proud Boys who are being charged with crimes in this case. There were 8 confidential human sources. At least. Kelly says to the jury, stipulations are facts the parties agree to. You should consider any stipulation of fact to be undisputed evidence. Undisputed evidence that there were 8 sources, informants. We don't know how many other feds were involved. Paid feds agents were also involved. We don't know. And Kelly says, undisputed. Prosecutors agree. 8 sources for 5 defendants. With that said, break for 10 minutes. Jury leaves. It's going to be a very long video they're going to play. Can't hear the video. The video the jurors are watching today is 90 minutes. It's Jeriguai playing a clip from the Proud Boys teleconference. And she's uploading the clips to YouTube if you want to watch this. It's a 90-minute conversation. She's got all the clips. Make sure you're following Brandy Buckman if you want to go watch the rest of it. Says this should end the evidence after this video. There's still other witnesses who want to be called. Now, attorney for Dominic said that today their team has a witness ready, and if there's time, they'll bring that back up. Jurors are paying close attention. Tario's leaning forward in the chair. A joke is shared amongst the Proud Boys that elicits a smile. They're using the R word. Video continues. Jurors hear Tario and the Proud Boys laughing. They're talking about a 6-pointed star, 1.6, and elders. Laughing and crosstalk. They're yucking it up and talking about those MAGA hoes out there. Shout out to all the MAGA hoes. As they talk about the coming event on 1/6, this is a pre-1/6 video, and the need to keep women and MAGA out of the ranks that day. One Proud Boy recalls how a woman told him to make a hole so she could get past the line. So the defense is being shown The video ends in court. Now the jury is excused for lunch. Judge says, I suspect we moved through a bunch of witnesses quicker than the parties thought. Let me see what the schedule looks like. What's your preference? Here we go. What is your preference as far as addressing the sealed matter for the next witness? Prosecutor says, we do think it makes sense to make use of the jury's time. We're prepared to move forward with Mr. Riley. But if something comes up, we'd like a chance to address it. They're back after lunch. Next witness is up. This is Patrick Riley. And this attorney is Roger Roots, who brings up witness Patrick Riley. Patrick, where do you live? He says, I currently live in Boston, work in advertising, shoot TV commercials. He has a shaved head, bald, neatly trimmed goatee, wears a dark suit, white collared shirt. He says, I like to do photography at political events. Do you recognize these people here? He says, yeah, I recognize Tario, different events. Went to one in 2019, same for Biggs and Nordine. I recognize him. I never met or even spoke to Pizzola. Not a close friend with Biggs. Don't think that he didn't invite him to the wedding, but we've shared Airbnbs and got a nasty snoring habit. Are you a Proud Boy? No, not a Proud Boy. Never been a Proud Boy. Did you come through DC on 1/6 taking photographs? He says, yeah, I did. I got in around 8, started taking photos around 9. I took photos, went back to Boston in the early afternoon. Says, I started taking photos around the Ellipse and went through the crowd until I saw the Proud Boys congregating near the Washington Monument. Followed them as they marched along. Well, I want to pull up one of the photos you took. Riley says it was right after the march started. He got a few yards ahead, turned around, black and white photo shows the Proud Boys marching towards the Capitol. Do you share the politics of these guys? He says, no, absolutely not. I don't share their politics. How long did you march with them? I don't know, maybe 20, 25 minutes. Were you the only person taking photos? No, there were a lot of media taking photos. Where were you now in this photo? We were at the food trucks. He says, it wasn't that far away from the Capitol. Do you happen to see people with radios there? He says, well, you can see Joe has a radio on. Did you see them use the radio? He says, I saw them get frustrated, like the radio wasn't working or something, but I didn't see them speak to anyone on it. If they got them working at some point, I didn't see that. Oh, so the Proud Boys, their radios weren't even working. Remember that? They said they had radios to insurrect the country. They couldn't even get them to work. He says, at the food truck, he says, it was almost like the event was over. It was quiet, kind of sad. I was going to take the train home. I was kind of sad that it was ending. I thought it was going to be a raucous event, and then it petered out. He said, did you guys notice Antifa there? Somebody asked him if there was a bus full of Antifa. Riley said, I think that's ridiculous. It was just wishful thinking. It seemed like a boogeyman was there. There was nobody to fight with. It was just kind of lame. So what happened next? Well, I got on a bus and went over to Boston. And there I started getting text messages asking if I was okay. No further questions. Prosecutor comes back up, asks Riley, the photographer. So you were with a group at the monument until they ended the food trucks. Is that true? Yeah. And at some point at food trucks, you left to get your train. It was booked already. Yeah. So you're at the food trucks and you march with them. But you weren't there when Nordine rounded up people to go to the peace circle, were you? He says no. And you didn't have any idea where they were going after you left, right? Right. No further questions. Witness is done. Very short. So Judge Kelly asks for a sidebar. Brandy Buckman continues at Brandy Buckman on Twitter, says, the husher is now off. And Judge Kelly says, all right, everybody. I've got a couple things to discuss with the lawyers outside of your presence, but you're not dismissed for the day. All right. But I am going to excuse you for a little bit more time here. So the jurors exit and Kelly tells the clerk, all right, we're going to proceed in a sealed session now. 10-minute recess and then we'll be sealed. Kelly didn't dismiss the jury, and they're still sealed. Trump got indicted. We covered that. Brandy's still there. Courtroom is still sealed. Time goes by, still sealed. It's 4:30 and it's 5:15, and then she has to leave, and the jury might still be there. Now, a court representative is cutting feed to the media room. They're still sealed. And that's it for the day. Now, as we saw, thank you to Brandy for getting us through day 50, but we saw that the media was surprised and shocked by that. Why did they just lock us out? They filed their motion. And on day 51, the judge started the day with, again, denying access to the continual sealed hearing. We pick back up. Day 51, Proud Boy seditious conspiracy trial with Brandy Buckman. We're still missing Roger Parloff today. Yesterday was productive. We're very close to the end of this marathon, and they've been going hard, and away we go. Judge Kelly is on the bench. All the attorneys are present. Roger Roots is not here today, but other attorneys are. Judge says, okay, look, I want to start with this expert witness for Pizzola. He says, I'm going to preview where we are. He says, look, I'm not sympathetic to the extent the government has argued that the disclosure is late because it's being made at this hour. I'm just not sympathetic to that. The reason, in part, is because when I was researching case law, one of the cases is cited, and the testimony could be cabined into any of this, so I'm open to hearing some of this stuff. They're talking about whether a witness was disclosed appropriately. Pretty boring stuff. Now, Kelly says that we should turn to the instruction this morning, but there's a sidebar. The husher goes on. Husher goes off. So Kelly says, all right, let's pick up where we left off on jury instructions. They're talking about the defense proposed First Amendment instructions. We haven't received any comments on it. We'll read the jury instructions when they're out. I'm not going to drag us through the discussions about the jury instructions. We'll read them when they're out and see what they say. Let's see if we get to any other testimony. They're discussing what unlawful means. It's very difficult to communicate what they're debating about because I'd rather just read it. But I can't believe they're doing jury instructions this morning. Okay. Here is the charge on seditious conspiracy. Court included language under seditious conspiracy line. Yeah, it's hard to see what they're arguing about because it's when you're talking jury instructions, it's literally what the language says word by word, and she's translating this and she's doing a great job, but we'll just read them when they're out. So they're still debating. Is this the whole day? We got the filing. Okay, now the press shows up. So they spent a lot of time hashing through jury instructions. The press shows up, and the press says, Your Honor, Emmy Parsons says, it looks like the court is entering a sealed session, and we want access to this. There's a long line of cases grounded in the idea of a right of access. And the decision to close this is limited. You shouldn't be using this. And the judge says, I acknowledge we're operating on a last-minute basis to seal this, but at the same time, I believe there are alternatives. Judge Kelly says, well, thank you for your motion, and says, I agree with you, actually. The openness of proceedings are very important, but There are two different things here. There's a First Amendment basis and there's a common law basis. And there should be a history of unbroken openness on the issue. And on the issue that they are discussing here, there is not that history. Even if there were, Judge Kelly says, there must be an overriding interest to preserve higher values of a right to access. The judge says, in this case, in order to keep these proceedings sealed, Judge Kelly says, in this case, it's quite easy for me to find that the overriding interest does exist. As far as common law goes in this circuit, I have considered factors and they weigh in favor of closing the courtroom briefly. He tells the press, I'll put on the record under seal more detail regarding that and factual findings, but I've considered them and your right of access will be denied for some period of time. Defense attorneys are objecting. They say, we didn't raise these issues and I won't put them on the record, but this court has to consider the essential values, the integrity of these judicial proceedings, the nature of these proceedings are fundamentally the highest value in any criminal prosecution, and our interest overlaps with the press. So the press and the defense are begging, open this up, let us see it. He says the public has a right to know what goes on in the courtroom. And the right of any individual member of the public is being attenuated by denying them that right. A press member may be here to vindicate that right, but they still need to be here. And our defendants have a right in the Sixth Amendment. And closing the court abridges his rights in this trial. And the judge says, all right, listen, I'm still going to seal this court. And I'm going to tell you the reasons why I'm sealing this court. But the reasons are also going to be under seal. Well, that defeats the purpose, Judge, says the defense. Without going into the details, I think the public has a right to know why it's being excluded from the courtroom and have factual findings. Not only are they excluding us, but they're not telling us why they're excluding us. It's double lack of transparency. We want to know what the basis is. If the basis is to protect sources and methods or whatever the FBI makes up, why can't they tell us that? Kelly says, well, the problem with this case is there's no way for me to do that. Okay, I can reach appropriate legal standards publicly, but there's no way for me to do anything more without defeating the very purpose of going under seal. All the defense attorneys are upset about this. Jaraguay, Tario joins. Okay, so this is something that's big. This is something that's very important. All the defendants want this out. The prosecutor, of course, sides with Kelly. He says, well, Judge, hold on. It would be appropriate to keep the court closed for fear of harming the integrity of the case. That's the point. That's the entire job of the defense, is to shatter the integrity of your case because your case has no integrity. If it had a bunch of integrity, then you wouldn't be worried about the harm. What's the worry? What's the fear of harming the integrity of your case? Parson says, Your Honor, there was already a sealed hearing yesterday for 3 hours, and you didn't put that in the docket either. So the judge is not even putting the sealed hearings in the record. We can't even follow along. So they're not telling us that they're sealing hearings or the reason for the sealed hearings, and they're still doing the sealed hearings. You said that you would provide a written order under seal laying out your specific findings, Judge. If you could just ensure that is placed on the docket with some indication, if you can, the length of time that you think we should be sealed. And Judge Kelly, he says, gosh, I know you want to know about this case, but gosh, part of the reason why this is so difficult to judge is because, as you indicate, my ruling here is for a moment in time, and it may well be down the line that there's a basis to unseal some of all of this or prior proceedings. So I understand your motion, and I think there is some relief I can grant you, and I will do it. I don't know what that is. But then he goes to clear the courtroom. Defense attorney Metcalf says, I have a witness I've had here all morning. Is there any way that we can, why don't we discuss that when we get back in the rest of your game plan? They take a 10-minute break. Brandy says, well, I'm going to step away from the court for a few minutes so that it'll reopen, which is a good thing. Sometimes this happens, when you go to a restaurant, food takes forever. You get up, go to the restroom, come back, food's there. It's like magic. She tried to see if that would happen in court. Let's see what happened. It didn't work. Oh, bummer. So the Justice Department is here. Things are still under seal. Signs of life. We're back. Court is back open. Kelly's back on the bench. We have a witness. Stephen Metcalf is at the podium, runs a comb through his hair at the counsel's table, takes a sip of water. We're ready. Takes to the podium. The defense calls Lisa McGee to the stand. She is wearing a blonde and white polka dot dress, glasses, long blonde hair, pulled back in a neat ponytail. Soft voice. Defense says, sorry I had you waiting all day here, Lisa. Can you tell me about yourself? Yeah, I'm 40 years old. 2 daughters. With Pizzola, who's the defendant. How old are your daughters? 18 and 22 years old. Both going to school. One's attending trade. One's getting her master's. And how long have you been with Pizzola? Says we've been together for a little over 22 years. Wow. Now, what were you doing when you were introduced to Dominic? She says, I was a waitress. We hit it off. We had a date. I saw him at the restaurant a couple times, said hi, here and there. I had this thing where I wouldn't date customers, but since I was introduced to him outside the environment, I got to know him a bit better and gave him a shot. I was 18 at the time. He was 23. She learned that he was a single father, wanted custody. She says he was in the Marine Corps, avid boxer throughout high school, won awards for boxing at school. I want to show you a pic of this guy. Is this Dominic? She says, yeah, it's Pizzola from his boxing days. There's a woman in that picture. Who's that? Oh, that's Gloria Peak. That's the first African-American lesbian boxing coach who went on to coach people in the Olympics. And he says to McGee, Lisa, well, what did Dominic think of her? And so you see, he says, oh, Pizzola highly respected her, her wisdom, her coaching, her training, her guidance in life. And this is a nice, way to ingratiate Dominic Pizzola with the lesbian African-American boxing coach community. And so if there is any jurors on there who fit any of those categories, for example, if there are jurors who happen to be African-American or lesbian or boxing coaches or people who went to the Olympics, they're going to think, oh, Dominic Pizzola likes those people in those categories, And so rather than having these Proud Boys created to be these caricatures of white supremacy and bigotry, no, he likes African-American lesbian boxing coaches who went to the Olympics, by the way. So Pizzola is leaned back in his chair a little bit, watching his wife intently as she testifies. Stressful, man. Now there's another picture. He's been in custody this whole time. There's another picture now from the right. He graduated. He was pursuing his Golden Glove. Maggie was working to be an apprentice for an electrician. Said he had very large hands. So it's tough for him to fit his fingers into tight electrical spaces. It was dangerous. So Pizzola went to work for his father, opened a flooring company, ran a crew himself. There's another picture of Pizzola with his dog. They asked Pizzola's wife, Lisa, oh, tell us about your dog. Oh, that's Mason. He's cuddling with him while he sits in an armchair. That's Dominic's boy, says Lisa. Here's another pic of another dog. Who's this? This is Osiris. He died of cancer. Now, when you guys moved in together, tell me about Pizzola fighting for custody. Yeah, he raised her. She says she's our daughter now. And what did Pizzola do? He worked all the time, 80 hours a week. Days he wouldn't get home until 3 or 4 a.m. So he could finish a job and start another. And what happened when COVID hit? Oh, extraordinarily difficult, says Lisa. He stopped working during the height of the pandemic. He did contract work at hospitals and schools. Because of the lockdowns, he was unable to get work regularly. And there was a BLM protest that turned violent in Rochester. She was working at the courthouse downtown at the time, was sent home early because of the protest. There were other things going on in Rochester at the time, diners, Ox and Stone. Protests were taking place about 1,000 feet from where she was working. I got a phone call that there was violence turning on, and there were personal vehicles set on fire, and there was a construction trailer that was tied to a company that Pizzola was working for. But because of the riots, that work was shut down. When Lisa was working at the courthouse, she was a supervisor of pretrial release. So she would go to jail early, run background checks, collect information. Apparently, there was an incident from the Pizzola household, 6 or 7 miles from their house. Dominic was aware of this. And fires, something happened. They sent us home early. Now, due to all of these changes, due to attacks on your city, due to COVID lockdowns, due to economic insecurity, were there any changes in Dominic? She says, yeah. She sighs. Yeah. You know, he always went to the gym. He always went to work. He was an active person. He started drinking very heavily, and he'd inundate himself with Fox News day and night. Before COVID, was he into politics? No, barely. He became consumed around this time. I told him to find some friends and a hobby. But is that why he's sitting here today? She says, yeah, it is. Because the wife told him to find some friends and get a hobby. He joined the Proud Boys. She started the whole thing. Maybe if Lisa didn't tell Dominic to find some friends and find a hobby, there would be no January 6th. Shout out to all the loving wives out there. We have another one. This continues. It was around this time, end of November, that Lisa says she found out that he applied to the Proud Boys. Did you find out what he did in November? Well, look who's back. I believe he ran into a guy named Dick Sweats, who's back in the house. Sweets or sweats? Sweets or sweats? Okay, so the defense lawyer says, I got to be clear here. You're telling me that Pizzola ran into a Proud Boy named Dick Sweats? Defense lawyer says, wait a minute. Sweets? Like Dick Sweets or Dick Sweats? Sweats. Did he go by another name? No, not that I know of, but I also thought his name was ridiculous. Yeah, so do we. Yeah, so do we. Yeah. Okay. No other names. All right, there you go. So Lisa says at this time, Pizzola told her a little bit about the Proud Boys. You know, they'd protect people, stop rioters, get in contact with them. So he ended up joining. And he went to D.C. on the 12th, right? Yeah, by that time he had become a Proud Boy. He was photographed. Washington Post had him on the front page. Washington Post put him on the front page. What'd you say to him? Lisa says, I called him an effing idiot. I said, you're an effing idiot for being on the front page. She says that the trip Pizzola took to the Jeremy Bertino event was not, not to deliver a shield for nefarious purposes. She said, my father came by our house on January 5th and told Dominic, hey, don't go to DC, buddy. You got a wife and 2 kids. All right. Don't go over there. Father-in-law knows best. A defense says, well, what did Pizzola say when his father-in-law warned him? He says, you're right. I understand where you're coming from. I'm not going to go. So then January 6th comes. Defense says, are you at home? She says, no. Where'd you go? I went out with my friends. We had a girls' night out and then went to the casino. And that's when Dominic left to go to DC. She said, up until I decided to have a girls' night out, he planned to stay home. But then when I left, he decided to go. So she went out for a girls' night. So he went to DC. caused the insurrection. Would you lie for him? No. Why not? Well, I don't see a reason to lie for him. Now, I want to ask you about his commitment to the Marines and to his job and his children. Is it true that Pizzola... Wait a minute. Is this McCullough? Okay, that's Metcalf. I think we're into direct now, into cross now. Says, Pizzola's oath didn't end when he left the Marines, right? Yeah, I believe that's true for all service members. And as you said, when he got into 2020, he was paying more attention to politics. True. Yeah. And you saw him increasingly focused on the battle of this good versus evil, right? Objection, overruled. He became increasingly focused on politics. You understood him to be increasingly focused on the split becoming apparent in the country. Is that true? Yeah. And he viewed the country as falling into two different sides, right? Yeah. Well, I don't know in terms of whether he saw it, as you put it, good and evil, just that there was a divide. Did he believe the country was on the brink of civil war? Did he tell that with you? She says, I don't really recall. Now, you said that Pizzola became increasingly committed to the Proud Boys, that he took 7 trips, and that he took a trip to the Carolinas to deliver a shield to Jeremy Bertino, right? Yeah. Now, I want to put up this photo of this shield, black and yellow on the screen. Have you seen it? That shield? No, I haven't seen it. It's kind of an art project. Yeah. And Dominic drove from Rochester to North Carolina. Yeah. And the purpose was not to just deliver the shield, but also to get out of New York and have a little fun vacation. She says, yeah. It's my understanding the person was supposed to deliver the shield got COVID. Oh, okay. And so Pizzola stepped up. Yeah. And that's what he does, right? He steps up when he's called on. And she says, yeah, depending. Yeah. So he went to DC. He took a trip from North Carolina. That's over 600 miles for a vacation to get away from COVID policies in New York. Is that what you're saying? She says, yeah. Do you know whether those policies are more lax in different areas? She says, I don't know what the policies are. Did you feel unrest in Rochester? And she said, yeah, the only way to go out to dinner at that time was to eat outside. Our country was insane under the total control of a bunch of medical maniacs. She said the protest angers her. They petrified me. They made me fearful. And Dominic was there to protect you, right? Yeah, I would say so. And so when you're scared or angry, you'll assume he'll be able to protect you. She said, well, I would assume so, but that's not always the case. Now, when we searched your home with a warrant and raided everything, there was a notebook that we recovered in your house that we rummaged through along with everything else. He brings up this spiral-bound notebook up at the witness stand. You recognize this notebook? Yeah, this was the notebook Dominic used when he was taking a college math course. This is what prosecutors do. Everything in your house is fair game. My daughter could really use this right now. She's struggling. Great line. Great line. Outstanding shout out to Lisa. Just so we're clear what happened here. This prosecutor, because these prosecutors and FBI agents, they raid everything. They take everything. And they rummage through it like little just cretins. Oh, what's in here? What's in here? Disgusting. And so you can just imagine. Imagine if somebody came into your home and did this. Went through all of your notebooks, everything, and dragged this one out. What is this notebook? Like this smug prosecutor. And so she comes out and she says, oh, yeah, that's the notebook Dominic used when he was taking college math. My daughter could really use that right now. She's struggling. Can I have that back? He says, yeah. Making them eat that, right? The fact they took it. Ask, oh, yeah. Okay. Why don't you turn to the yellow tab inside the book? You recognize his handwriting? Yeah, it's Dominic's. Well, I want to turn your page over there. You recognize that handwriting? She looks at the page. Yeah, that's my handwriting. I want to turn you back over to another page. It's her handwriting again. Now let's look at the pages in between them. She says, well, I saw this, but I never read it. On the first page of the notebook, Pizzola describes why he wants to become a Proud Boy. She says, I'm reading. Give me a minute. reading it. Okay. Did he say he would fight until his last breath to make sure his children don't inherit in a communist country? Objection, hearsay, overruled. Judge lets it in. Well, that's what it says here. He wrote it ultimately that if we are, so they're reading this guy's journal now, essentially, right? He was writing some notes. They're reading his journal in open court. So just remember, this is what they do, right? When you're taking your journal notes and all your stuff, right? They raid everything. I'm not saying you're going to be committing crimes or be raided by the FBI, but just be, they have no shame. They'll go through everything. He wrote, ultimately, if we're not in a civil war, I'd like to open a dog sanctuary. You see that? Maggie's reading. She says, I see where he says that. Pizzola continues to write in the book that he truly believes this is a battle between capitalism and communism, freedom versus tyranny. Did Pizzola ever share with you his views that the country was on the brink of civil war? I don't recall him ever saying that to me, no. Did he ever describe the concept of a country falling into a battle of good versus evil or freedom versus tyranny? Is this illegal? Can you not say that? We say that like 3 times a show. Sheesh. Waiting for the feds to come crashing through the windows. No, not to me. So when Pizzola left to go to D.C. on 1/5, you didn't know what was in his head. No, I had no idea. I don't possess the power of telepathy, prosecutor, so no. So just knew that he was going to D.C. with the Proud Boys? Yeah, I knew he was going to D.C. I assumed it was with the Proud Boys. And you were frustrated with his relationship with the Proud Boys, weren't you? Well, I was frustrated with the amount of drinking he was doing. He went from drinking a couple beers to entire bottles of bourbon. He had changed. When he came back from D.C., were you frustrated with him? Objection, out of scope, going way past the timeline, way outside direct. Overruled. Can you repeat the question? Withdraws the question. Now, he returned from D.C. and he didn't stay for long. He was there through Friday, January 8th, but left the following day on the 9th. And you were able to get in touch with him? Objection sustained. Another objection sustained. Metcalf is back up on redirect. Says, sorry, I have asked to get before I get you out of here. When Dom went to North Carolina, did he drive? Yeah, I think so. You sure it wasn't other individuals who did the driving? No, I don't know. Was it his home? Was his truck gone? No, it was home. So he had no other vehicle, right? Yeah. So someone had to pick him up for that trip then, right? Yeah. Did you later learn about other stops? Who was the other individual with him? Was it Ronnie? I think it was somebody named Casper. Did you come to find out that Casper had a bunch of different people and family they made stops at? Yeah. How many of those stops did you know about? I don't recall. I think there were several. So here you see they're trying to say he didn't drive 600 miles for, an insurrection planning meeting. They made a bunch of stops. It was a road trip. Now, Brandy continues, there are stipulations that are being made to the jury. We've got new stipulations. Defendants and prosecutors agree to new stipulations. We'll go through them when the documents are posted. Here are a few. Traveled to D.C. with Matt Green. After the barricade breach, 3 men joined the demonstrators at the Peace Circle. These 2 had no contact with the defendants. And there we go. With that, Judge Kelly ends the trial day for the jury and dismisses them. Jurors are gone now. Defense approaches, argues for expert testimony. Metcalf says, I should be able to elicit expert testimony about police formation and police tactics. All these riot police everywhere. What were they doing? Judge says, well, what's your argument? Is it that Pizzola did not intend to rob anyone because it was self-defense? He says, no, it was in defense of others. No, says Metcalf. Says there are certain different times when people erupt. Ryan Samsel's getting aggressive. Judge says, but Ryan Samsel episode is outside the very tightly constrained boundaries of time and place that you're talking about. But Metcalf says, no, Judge, not until you see what the video shows. He says, whatever evidence you want this witness to talk about, the facts are in evidence either way. So this expert testimony, the judge says, I guess my question is, what would they witness? What would this witness testify to that would negate the elements of the defense that would not be self-defense or defense of others. He says, I understand the theory. Okay, Pizzola grabbed the shield and how that could, in theory, provide self-defense. He grabbed the shield because he didn't want to be hit or someone else. But the problem is, again, we litigated this already. I already ruled on it a long time ago. It seems that this way, quite a long time ago. But my point is, what's different now? How could this be a defense or negate the elements of the crime? Even if you can articulate some very dancing on the head of a pin answer, it certainly feels like the effect of a juror hearing this evidence would be an invitation to a defense that I've excluded. And the defense chimes back in. This is confusion. It mitigates the intent. Chaos mitigates intent. It's madness. There is no intent. When Pizzola falls, people fall. There's a lengthy back and forth. Judge Kelly doesn't seem convinced. Metcalf is very animated, very loud. Kelly asks him twice, lower your voice. We're right here, he says. We're all here. He says, you're speaking to the judge, not the jury. I don't need all the showmanship. Just take it easy. He's still really pushing. Kelly's not buying it. He says, how does agitating the crowd negate the theory that he committed the robbery? He says it shows the police deviated from a policy in an instant, and it created the storm of chaos. People are laying on top of you. There's a shield on top of you. Officers are using a different force in conflicting ways. But the judge says, well, so what? Why is it relevant how people fell on him? I'm having trouble how it negates his intent regarding the riot shield. Defense says one thing a jury won't be able to consider unless this witness is on the stand is something called a rescue circle. The rescue circle, for example, provides context as to why officers were the way they were and why they started using repellents. And Metcalf, his tone is borderline shrill, she says, exclaims, you gotta grant me something here, Judge, something. Judge tells the defense, you've got to explain something. You got to explain he got the shields and how it's not that he wanted to defend himself. How does this expert witness explain a defense that's not self-defense? Kelly's not convinced. I understand negating the robbery charge is downstream important of intent, but how does this expert testimony negate the robbery? He says the police created a more dangerous environment than what existed. Circumstances around the robbery happened so fast, every fact matters. I can't explain what a rescue circle is without an expert. And he says Marco Day was in or behind a botched raid circle, and it diverged with people around Pizzola. The jury should be able to hear that, make a decision as to the use of force and the intention at the time. One causal link leads to another. He says, but they still need to explain that it was a rescue circle. And even if I bought that, what is really outside the most clear outside bounds is a deviation from policy. It says if the police caused this in some way, they caused it. Why does it matter if it's a deviation of policy? Because it stirred up and created the entire situation. Kelly says, nope. Pattis passes a note to Metcalf at the podium while he's talking. Kelly says, the judge, okay, so it was chaos. And as a result, he wasn't trying to rob? So just explain. I'm sorry, I don't understand your argument, I confess. I'm going to hear from the government. If you want to submit something tonight, submit something. I'll take a look at it. I'll look at the motion. The defense says, I'll give you 5 examples. Police formation, leadership setup, leadership tactics, commands to officers, deviating from the crowd's reaction. And they're continuing to argue about this. Prosecutor weighs in. And outside of a deviation from the policy, nothing was in the notes, says the prosecutor. It's insufficient. And then Brandy's tweet thread drops off right there. Let's see if there was another follow-up to this. And here's where we pick it up. Metcalf says, if you deny my expert, I'm going to put somebody else on the stand. I'd say this. Evidence is going to bleed over past tomorrow. There's 2 more evidentiary hearings that we're going to have issues on. Hernandez is asking how much time we're going to be spending on the sealed portion. Kelly says draft instructions for Biggs. They're all talking about scheduling stuff. Next Friday, are we sitting on the 14th on Valentine's Day? I've got to take my wife out or she'll kill me, says the prosecutor. Plan at least a half a, oh wait, that's not on the 14th. It's a Friday. Yeah. In district court, she's committed to this day. Defendants are on talking about closing arguments scheduled. And that ends it for the day. And so we will leave it right there. Proud Boys trial, day 51 comes to a close. Back tomorrow, 9 a.m. And we'll see what witnesses we have in store. And so that, my friends, is it for the Proud Boys trial. We are now caught up. Day 50, day 51. The Ray Epps subpoena was denied by the judge. Court has been largely sealed in this matter. And of course, we'll continue to cover it. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for liking this video wherever it is you're watching it. And we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. All right, my friends. Well, that is it for us on the day. And so we are going to leave it right there. I want to thank everybody who is joining us over for our after party at watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Don't forget to head on over there. We're going over there for just a few minutes. We're out of time. And so I'm going to say thank you to the mods tomorrow. But mods and meme smiths, thank you. You know who you are. We are going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com for our after party. We also have to thank our super chat supporters who sent messages in. And so let's do that, my friends, before we wrap it up on this day. We had a couple comments. Oh, we had a bunch of comments. All right. So locals, I'm going to start a second stream. So we're going to hang here for a little bit longer. But locals, I got to start a second stream. So locals, you hang tight. I got to start another one because we're going to run out of time here in about 30 seconds. So locals, go to the new feed, part 2. And then we're going to get into the super chats. Right in a short minute, my friends. Okay, super chats in the house. Thank you, everybody, for sending these in. Very grateful for your support here on the show. We had Michael Allen Hughes. He said, nobody's above the law except for the most liberals, Biden's, Clinton's, FBI henchmen, and others like Ray Epps. Good comment from Michael Allen Hughes. A lot of people here. Yeah, I mean, everybody is above the law except anybody who's a Trumper, J6er, anybody who is antithetical to their political narrative. They are all above the law. Nobody else is. Voice of the People says, there was nothing there. Trump should walk. Bet he will still be found guilty. Look at the judge and the pool of people for the jury. This will start a bad thing, and you know what I mean. I hope everything stays calm and peaceful there, Voice of the People. And Voice of the People's on YouTube, by the way. You can certainly go over there and subscribe. But he says Trump should walk. Yeah. Based on what we've seen, Voice, I'm not sure that this case even makes it to a trial. I'm not sure it makes it to a jury because the documents are so bad. Good to see you, Voice. Thanks for the dono. K Bean is here. Thank you for asking about the audio on locals. That was weird. It cut out a couple times, and I don't know what that was all about. But thank you, K Bean. Here, this one came in from Zulu. Says Biden was only locker room smirking. You just don't understand him. Oh, that was the Biden smirk when he's like giggling. It's a locker room smirk. It's good to see you, Zulu. Thank you for the dono and for the comment. It's a Trump dig, right? I get it. I think I'll have to think about that one. It's pretty smart for me. It's complicated. Carl Borkers says that smile from realizing the judge's daughter's company is doing campaign work. Joe, Kamala, Gavin, this judge needs to recuse himself. Yeah, and they're all upset about that. That the left is upset that the judge's daughter works for Kamala. What is that? Why are they upset about that? Because it shows bias. You can't point that stuff out. Feels a little problematic. And there's other hints and rumors that this judge has donated to certain lefty causes in opposition to Republicans. Kumi's here, says babies also smile like that when they're filling their diaper. Just saying. From Kumi talking about the president. Yeah, maybe he's just, he's really, wow, that was a big one, and the room's going to clear out. That's why she's clearing everybody out. She doesn't want anybody to smell it. Good call, Kumi. Dolphin fan with 10 new members. Thank you, Zulu, for flagging that for us. And our friend Dolphin fan for bringing in some new members. And I think I have a couple of those names. Dolphin fan, we've got Third Proverb, Wendy C, Vanessa, Jill, Electric Beavers in the house, Kelly, Cruz, everybody, Cyber, Liz, Bots, you guys all got invited courtesy of our amazing friend, Dolphin fan. And thank you, Dolphin fan, for continuing to bring in and fill up our new membership. And if you're not already a member on YouTube, you can certainly join us, but grab our Telegram link because that's where we'll be for our after party in just a short minute. And thank you, Zulu, for flagging that for me. I need to figure out a way to capture those better, but I appreciate your help on that. Thank you, Zulu. Fred is here. Fred Pedamonte and his rascally dog, Johnny. You can see Johnny over there, this cute little fella. Don't let his cute, adorable face fool you. Okay, he's very nefarious. He says, Rob, I came home today and Johnny was in my bedroom, with Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen. I hid. Door knocked. It was Alvin Bragg. They were all laughing. What were they doing in there is my first question. Johnny's in the bedroom with Stormy and Michael. Alvin Bragg showed up. They were all laughing in there, probably giggling, tickling. Maybe Michael Avenatti's over there. Weird stuff going on. And Fred's dog is, of course, as usual, behind it. Thank you, Fred. Hopefully he enjoyed himself. I don't know how you can enjoy yourself. He says, Rob, I came home later and Johnny was talking to Trump Jr., Alina Abba, and Rudy Giuliani. They had Trump on speaker. They were all laughing too. Something's up. Well, okay, at least they weren't in your bedroom. That's better. So Johnny, maybe that's what they were doing in the bedroom. Johnny was getting all the goods, all the pillow talk. There it was. Got the pillow talk in the first session, brought it out, and disclosed all the goods to Alina Abba. Got to hang out with her. That's pretty cool. Hey, Adam M is here. Thank you, Fred, for the double. Adam M says, coincidence, this arrest is right before Easter? LOL. Robert Barnes posted a spicy take on that one. He's having fun with that one. Robert Barnes. Shout out to Robert Barnes and our friend Viva. Robert Barnes posted, who else was arrested around Easter time? One of those. And, that really triggers a lot of people, which is why you post those things. Voice of the People says Ray Epps is protected because he's a Fed boy. Certainly feels that way to me. He said he told the J6 committee that he wasn't, but he also told them that he was in the Capitol. So how'd that work out? Well, he didn't get charged. So I wonder what justification exists for not charging him. Ian Mack says, what are the chances that Karine remains as absolute and not commenting on ongoing legal matters with Trump like she was with the garage files? Yeah, that's a good question. It's going to be hard for her to continue to say that when her White House is, well, she's just going to defer everything to the special counsel. She'll keep doing what she's been doing this whole time. Thank you, Ian. Ian Mack for the dono. And Isaac Bowles is in the house. Thank you, Isaac. Says, I love MAGA hoes. Yeah, I mean, this sounded interesting, sounds interesting. Might be a good time. I don't know. Shout out to all the MAGA hoes in the house. All right. Thank you for that, our YouTube friends. Very grateful for all of the nice donos that came in. Very generous. And hey, Geegum Geegum over on Locals had sent in a tip. We were asking the question about why they were pulling this prosecution out of their back pocket. Poof, what do you got here? Where'd it come from? She said, I think it's clear. They are distracting from the tragic fall of the dollar. And have you seen that, right? It's all over the place. Everybody's bailing out of the dollar, creating new agreements to exchange in other currencies. Gold and silver seem like they're climbing up. People are talking about Bitcoin, bailing into Bitcoin. A lot of good stuff there. Who's over here? We got a Rumble friend. Our friend CanCon. CanCon is on Rumble, sent in a Rumble rant. And CanCon, I think I was just looking at your channel, I believe. I think you popped up on my Rumble feed. Says, how can you, so shout out. So make sure you're following CanCon if you're watching over on Rumble. Says, how can you up the charges to felonies without a conviction, charge, or even mention of the crime being covered up? And the payments were while he was president. He relinquished his position in the org. Great comment from CanCon. And it's a good question. We don't know. It's the underlying, it's the aggravating offense that would take him from one category of a felony into an aggravated category that would extend theoretically the statute of limitations. It's bizarre. You're right. He referenced it, and CanCon, even if you go over to the press release, he references the concealment of an election crime. He talks about it very vaguely, but there's nothing substantive there. I agree with you. I think it's a gaping hole in this case. And your other point about the timing of the indictment and the charges are also very interesting. And so remember, you can access all of this stuff at spotlightlawyer.com/Trump. If you want to navigate the mind map, you can do it there. Let's see, there's some people here. You can see some people are navigating this thing right now. And spotlightlawyer.com/Trump. And what his take was on this, which is a good take, is that many of these dates, right? Look at these dates. June 19th, 2017. Didn't Trump win the presidency in November, was put in office in January of 2017? And so there were all sorts of deals that were made to separate him and create arm's length distance between Trump and a lot of his assets and his organization. So CanCon on Rumble, CanCon, is explaining that how could he be the person making the volitional, intentional act of signing the check? And I think they even referenced that he signed the checks, if he's at arm's length distance from it this entire time. It's a good question. We're going to see. Or if this was just, I do remember reading at one point that Trump likes to sign his checks, right? He likes to sign, I think, most of his checks. I think he talked about that as a business strategy, like as a good way to keep tabs on what's coming through your organization. I thought it was an interesting idea. So he might actually sign a lot of checks, but I don't know. I still don't know that creates intent. Okay, even if he signs the check, so what? He's just physically authorizing the transfer of the funds. But if he probably signs a billion checks, right? Checks all the time. And so that doesn't necessarily in and of itself by itself create this intent that there is an objective, which is to conceal another crime that he's going to commit that hasn't been identified. It's a good comment, CanCon. Appreciate you being here. And thanks for the tip. 1R5 is here. The Rumble rant says, what's the definition of peers as it pertains to juries? Biden, Hillary voters, and donors are not my peers in any way, shape, or form. Good question there from 1R5. And I see where you're going with that, the idea that a DC jury is not a jury of American peers, so to speak, in other parts of America. Like a California jury is going to be very different than a Texas jury. You can even find different juries across your state. In Arizona, let's say our Mesa, Arizona juries are going to be very different than our Tucson, Arizona juries. Okay. DUI in two different courts. One location doesn't drink a whole lot. The other location drinks a lot. And so A cross-section of your peers is defined lowest common denominator. It's like other citizens who are eligible to vote who are qualified, right? And then the jurors come in and then you voir dire them. You ask the jurors a bunch of questions. You say, has anybody been killed in known anybody killed in a DUI? Yeah, my mom was killed in a DUI. Okay, well, then you're not going to be a good juror in a DUI case. And so you get to probe the jurors through this process called voir dire. But in terms of, peers is very, very loosely defined. And so thank you for that one. 1R5, a Rumble rant coming in. And XSSFD says, what about Bragg asking this to go to trial in January 2024, right in the middle of the campaign season? Yeah, so timing on this is also going to be a major issue. And I get, so legally, yes, these cases, any felony cases, especially a felony case with 34 felonies is one that might take a while. We'll see what the judge does in terms of scheduling, but the judge could modify or extend or designate the case as a complex case so that, it takes more time. The judge could dismiss it immediately, say there is no sufficiency of this indictment and just dump it right out. But timing, legally, it can be fluid. Trump has a right to a speedy trial. I think if he exercised that, he could get it. But does he want to do that? We have to layer in the political process and the political timeline with a legal process and a legal timeline. And there are benefits and disadvantages to both sides of those. Something might be useful politically, Trump getting very loud, being very animated, being very aggressive, might be very useful politically, draw a lot of attention and energy to him. But then simultaneously, the judge may not like it, right? And it might be very bad for his attorneys. And so we have this sort of balance that we're constantly trying to figure out and pay attention to. But you can access all of this. All the documents are now on here. All of the indictment and the statement of facts are both here. And to just download these documents, you just click it like this, and boom, you can navigate the whole thing on your own. And so check all of that out, including these documents, including all the Michael Cohen stuff at spotlightlawyer.com/Trump. And so thank you to our Rumble friends. Blue Bunny's a member over there. Good to see you, Blue Bunny. Pepe the Gray, Jacob Castro, and others. But all right, my friends, now we are going to leave it there. We have a little bit more time now because I was on the clock, but we started another thread over on locals. And so we are going to say goodbye here. We are going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com. Wait a minute. We forgot Twitter. Let's say real quick. Let's say hello to our Twitter friends. See if there's anybody watching over there on Twitter. Hey, there's 3 people. Amazing. Woo, 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 woo. We're going to break the whole dang system. Let's see who's in the house. Yeah, this one came in from Jarbot. Jarbot says, this is sort of what it feels like right now. That's kind of what I'm looking like right now with my mind map, I guess. That's pretty true, right? That's kind of what we do here, is just mind map it out. James Pepper says, it says 0 viewers. How could I know if I'm not watching? I don't know. It's Twitter, man. Dems know what the dog feels like when the dog catches the car. They do. And it's not looking so good for them. Pumpkin Marie's here, catching the show live. Good to see you, Pumpkin Marie. Says, whether or not someone supports Trump's indictments after seeing the charges, now is the perfect litmus test for whether or not I can take this seriously. Kevin says, it's not just me here, is it? It might have been, Kevin. Could have been. Might just be solo. Sometimes it's only me. See how that feels. I'm here watching myself on Twitter, talking to myself, but that's how these things go. One day, maybe we'll have some double-digit viewers on Twitter. Then we can retire. If we ever got 100 viewers on Twitter, I think that would make me a billionaire or something. I don't know. Anyways, so that is it, my friends. We are going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com for our after party. If you're a YouTube member, don't forget to grab the Telegram link on the community section where I put the posts. There will be a Telegram link, and that's where you will be able to join us. Also want to remind you to get your vegetables, get that fruit, baby. so you can be energized and healthy and well, courtesy of our friends over at fieldofgreens.com. When you go over there, they've got all sorts of other stuff. If greens are not your thing, they should be because they're healthy for you. But if they're not, don't forget to grab something else. Use code Robert at checkout so you can save 15% when you leave. Also, the mind map, of course, is available. Spotlightlawyer.com/mind map or /Trump. Thank you to the mods who mod down the fort for us. Our friends Vianticus Prime, K-Bean, Just Cause, Playin' Hooky, Ronnie Cole, our friend Zulu, Geomancy Games, Zach Nichols, and John Allen. Grateful for all of you. Along with Twitter, our friend Sleepy Dog Lee, and on locals, Jigam Geegum, our meme Smith. Grateful for everybody who helps put this show together. We appreciate you. And so that, my friends, is it for us. We're going over to watchingthewatchers.locals.com for a little bit of an after party to see what else we've got. If you're on YouTube, grab the Telegram link. If you're a YouTube member, grab a link. But otherwise, my friends, we will be back here tomorrow to do it all again. And I would love to see you here so that together with your help, we can shine that big, beautiful spotlight of accountability and transparency down upon our system with the hope of finding justice. Make it a beautiful night, my friends. I'll see you right back here tomorrow. Bye-bye, everybody.